Good evening and welcome to the Town of Carlisle Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, November 13th, 2018. It's 7 o'clock, it's 7:03, so I'm going to go ahead and open the meeting. Reading through today's agenda, at 7 o'clock we will have community input. At 7:05, the Carlisle 4-H Creators Club presentation. At 7:15, Board of Selectmen discussion of the process and schedule to review the deer hunting pilot program. At 7:30, Carlisle Energy Task Force Municipal Solar Project vendor selection. At 8 o'clock, the Board of Selectmen discussion regarding the Housing Authority appointments, the Affordable Housing Trust and Authority roles and responsibilities and a path forward. At 8:30, Cemetery Deeds. At 8:35, joint Board of Selectmen Board of Health appointments. At 8:45, the Town Administrator reports. At 8:55, Board of Selectmen liaison reports. At 9:05, approval of minutes, and at 9:10, we are going to go into executive session, and at 9:30 we expect to adjourn. So with that, I will start off by opening it up to any public input. It's so many people here. Yes, please. Oh, I was over here.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Did I? I'm sorry. Did I go first? Okay. Hello, my name is Jeannie Janetsko, and I've been here a number of times since September 25th. I've been trying to get the Stop the Hunt, deer hunt on the Board of Selectmen and have not been able to. I find that the system doesn't work well because it doesn't tell you how to approach the Board of Selectmen. I went to the Board of Selectmen page on meetings, and what it says is all meetings are open to the public, and residents may address any issues or concerns that they have to the board during the open forum portion of the agenda near the beginning of each meeting. But it doesn't say anything beyond that. It doesn't say who to submit paperwork to. I was assured by the board that they would consider what I had to say, but I didn't get responses back. When I did get a response that I was going to be put onto the agenda for one of the meetings, it was retracted, and I did not even find out why it was retracted. So I've worked very hard for 6 weeks or since September 25th to get onto the Board of Selectmen. So it is, as I said, it is no secret that I'm on the Stop the Deer Hunt agenda here for myself. But what I did is I said, okay, if I'm having trouble getting onto the deer hunt agenda, other people maybe too. So I wrote a letter because I didn't even know who really to write the letter to. So I said, I'm going to blanket the whole Board of Selectmen and the town administrator and Jen Gibbons. And I wrote, Dear Nathan, Luke, Carrie, Kate, Al, Tim, and Jen, please return my name, read Deer Hunt, to the Board of Selectmen agenda for the next Selectmen's meeting, which I believe is November 13th. Please list all items I have previously submitted since September 25th, including town meeting for deer hunt decision, immediate cessation of the deer hunt, safety and liability issues, and my membership in the Deer Committee, because I very much want to be a member of the Deer Committee. At the top of the agenda items from my name, please put the deer hunt decision back under town meeting for a vote, as originally determined in the 2015 election. I could not find Luke's name on the list of selectmen for the town site, so please make sure he receives this email. And then very importantly, I put, finally to all, I could not find any procedure on the Board of Selectmen site on how to get onto the Board of Selectmen agenda for meetings. For the benefit of all Carlisleans, this document should be generated and placed onto the BOS site. And so I don't usually get an answer from the Board of Selectmen, but I did a very polite answer from Mr. Goddard, and he wrote, Dear Ms. Janetsko, the Board of Selectmen's agenda is created by the chairman. Agenda items are only approved by him or her. The November 13th agenda is not yet final and will be posted tomorrow. Chairman Nathan Brown stated previously that he would be placing on the agenda a board discussion of the process by which they will review the pilot deer hunting with input from the Deer Committee and Conservation Commission. And as you notice that I'm not included in any of this. So I wrote to to Nathan, and I wrote, please note what Tim wrote below. It appears that I will not be on the agenda again with my concerns. Please, and I note the word please. Please specifically put on the agenda as a separate item for the upcoming BOS meeting the creation of an official document to be permanently added to the BOS website that formalizes the procedure for a citizen of Carlisle to get their concerns on the Board of Selectmen agenda. I have been trying since September 25th. This is irrespective of the deer hunt. This has to do with basically citizenship within Carlisle and the right to be heard and the right to have my concerns discussed. And I got an answer from Nathan back. Jeannie, anyone is welcome to make a statement at community input. However, making a statement is one thing, being heard and responded to is something else, even if they say, we reject everything you have to say. However, there isn't a quote, process, unquote, that someone can follow to demand inclusion on the BOS agenda. I don't see anywhere where there is a demand being made. It is said that we can make statements. It implies that we will be heard and that we will be responded to. Do I expect that it will be in the affirmative? Not necessarily, but I expect that I will hear something back. I deserve to hear that as a citizen of Carlisle, and I haven't gotten any of those concerns met that I have. And that should be a concern for every citizen within Carlisle, because someday it will not be just me up here. It will be you up here, and you should have your concerns met as well. So he continued on. He says, as you probably know, the deer hunting, with that said, I have included deer hunting on our agenda next week, which again does not include me, so that I could be prepared. As you probably know, the deer hunting program is led by the Deer Committee and managed by the Conservation Commission. All of this at the request of the Board of Selectmen. And then he goes on to say, when the Board of Selectmen approved hunting, it was for 1 year, would follow up to the BOS from the Deer Committee and Conservation Commission after this year's hunt. At next week's meeting is my intention to lay out the process and expectations for this follow-up, which will be at a future meeting. It is my expectation that the Deer Committee will get input from citizens, the Conservation Commission, and hunters to include in their report to the BOS. I think that is an inadequate response to my request, because if you're getting input from one side at a meeting like this, it should be from both sides. And it hasn't been, because I haven't been diligent and polite and supplying a lot of information to get that, to at least be acknowledged and say, this is what we do. And even if you don't want any of my input, you should be brave enough to say, at public meeting, we don't want to hear anything you have to say. You have no input. So that is my input. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me get to...
Hello, my name's Debbie Bentley. I'm Heald Road, and I'm here on behalf of the Poppy Project. I'm here to request an extension to the display. It's due to come down on Thursday, but I'm asking that it be extended to Sunday, because tomorrow WBZ are coming to film the Poppy Project, and there'll be nothing more annoying than seeing it on television and find out it disappeared. So the idea is that we take it down Sunday afternoon, and then I'm asking if we could replant the poppies on the graves of those that served in World War I in the Green Cemetery for a further 2 weeks, so that people can, in the town, as they walk through the cemetery, can see where the graves are and pay their respects to the people. That's my request.
Is there a display of some sort, Debbie?
No, it's really small.
I almost had an accident a couple of times looking at them.
That's pretty beautiful.
So that's just what I'm requesting. And obviously, I'm sorry I didn't give you any time, but I didn't.
is there a way we can... put that in town administrator's report.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Ed Helm, East Street. I attended the Deer Committee meeting last week? And when I was there, they said that the hunt ends on the 24th. And we asked when the stands would be taken down, and they said they're going to give them 3 Sundays. I think they should come down the next day, the 25th, because there's another portion of the hunting starts with guns shortly after that. I don't like the idea of the stand still being up. Don't like the idea that a hunter could come back and possibly use that stand, whether they're legal or illegal hunters. I think there's no reason. I was told that it takes about 2 hours to put a stand up. It should take less time to put it down. If they're away for Thanksgiving for some reason, it ends by the Thursday is the 23rd. The hunt ends 24th. There's no reason they couldn't take it down before they go away if they're not going to be here for Thanksgiving.
Okay. Would you mind coming back up again when we're talking about the Deer Committee? I will be opening it for public input if anybody wants to talk, but that way we can respond to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, David Klein, Council on Aging, Town of Carlisle. 2 quick things. One, I want to publicly thank everybody involved in the road race, including the Selectmen, for granting us the ability to run the road race, to the police for protecting all the runners, and the sun for coming out. Anyway, we had a good time yesterday morning. A lot of volunteer help from kids from the Carlisle Public Schools, and although our numbers are down from prior years, it was still a very nice event. So I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that. And secondly, real quick, I have a feeling that Tim probably covered this in some way, shape, or form in his administrator's report, but I just want to mention that things are going pretty steadily with the Chennaw grant, with the 3 projects that we're working on. Linda Fantasia may have reported through the Board of Health that a public health nurse has been engaged, and she'll be working with both the Board of Health and the Council on Aging to serve people in Carlisle. So that's great. The other 2 committees or advisory groups that we have one is on the community center. Tim and Jen worked on getting out a request for qualification for vendors. We received 3 on Friday, and our group met today, and we are planning on interviewing 2 out of the 3. And it's on a pretty aggressive schedule, which is one of the reasons I'm mentioning it now, because we're supposed to be choosing one of the 3 by the 30th. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys a heads up so that, maybe we would be able to talk to it for a few minutes at the next meeting if you guys have the time.
So you want to get that on the agenda just in case?
The third project is as some of you know, is the transportation project, and we've had presentations from both Uber and Lyft, and we've had multiple meetings with the committee, which includes membership from the school committee and various other stakeholders in town hall, and it looks like we're getting closer to making a decision on what we want to do with that project and engaging somebody. So that's moving along too. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nancy Weiss. I'm on Brook Street. I would like to bring it to the Selectmen's attention that Brook Street has a lot of safety concerns that really need attention. I moved onto the street over 20 years ago. It had just been paved. The residents rolled their eyes and joked that they didn't get the road paved again until there were rocks jutting up from the bottom and the pavement wasn't there. Well, 3 seasons ago, we had the same situation. We had rocks jutting up. There was no pavement pretty much on a lot of the road. About maybe 5 years after we had moved in, there was a severe storm and it washed out a good 8 inches on either side of the pavement. So an already narrow road on a very curvy road that was dangerous even by the town standards to begin with was now 16 inches narrower. And it wasn't fixed, it wasn't repaired. Then when it was paved 3 years ago, it was not prepared properly. It was not taken back. It wasn't groomed. It wasn't graded to alleviate pools of water that collect and create ice. It wasn't graded so that pine needles and sand don't come back onto the road, narrowing it even further because nobody knows where the edge of the road is. And the pavement company, instead of easing out the curves, went deep into the curve and then abruptly changed at an angle. So the curves that were on Brook Street have become sharper. The greenery has been allowed to grow right up to the road edge, so that also has blocked your vision lines. And also, a couple years ago when the crews went through to take the trees and trim the trees, they kind of, I guess, figured nobody cared, and they dropped the dead wood into the woods. And there's a lot of dead wood in Carlisle. It's very concerning, and there's no way you're getting the water out of Carlisle Pond anymore because under the supervision of do nothing, it's been allowed to fill in. There are several summers where there's not a lot of water there, but you wouldn't be able to get stuff out for a fire pump with the reeds all there. And so we have no cisterns. We have embers are the things that cause fires the most, as we all can see in California, who does go in and take brush out and clean up the dead wood. And we have a lot of dead wood right by the road across from the houses. There are, 80, 90 houses on Brook Street, not including the streets that have to go through Brook Street to get out. So I think it's a very serious condition. Oh, and the telephone pole, which has been at the top of the safety list for how many decades? That the fire truck can't get into the road to service it. So I think you guys have some work to do on Brook Street. And I'm trying to bring it to your attention because I and my neighbors have called several times. We still have the dead storm wood from last winter right up at the edge of the road. So if a car's coming, you can't even go off to the side. It's really a glorified one-lane road, but I don't want it to become a one-way road. But we have construction vehicles, we have landscaping vehicles, we have cut-throughs with huge tractor trailers, and they come and they're not going over to the side because of the trees. And you have no place to go. You have no place to go. And you have these huge logs that weren't picked up last year. And people used to walk up and down all the time when we first moved in. And nobody walks on the street anymore. I mean, very few people do. Very few people do. And there's no place for them to jump if they need to. It's a very dangerous situation, and I hope you'll do something about it.
Okay, I just have a couple questions just
Sure.
to make sure I'm understanding. Is it are there particular sections that are more concerning than others, or is it the whole?
Yes. So if you turn on from 225 and you go,
First of all, is that where the pole is right there?
that's where the pole is.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's how you tell people. You have to tell them about it because otherwise your eye fills it in. You don't think there's a road there. So you turn down there and you go over the first bridge area. That's fairly wide. It does get flooded. It does flood, but it gets wide, and after a rainstorm or a good rainstorm, you are careful about whether or not the road has been undercutted. We had one good storm not too long ago, and you could see about 250, 300 feet up, you could see debris where the road had actually backed up water. It was amazing. Then you get into an area, about 3 houses in, the road drastically narrows, and you can tell where it's been narrowed. You can see where trees are cut out, where the plows have hit the trees. You can see banks that have been cut down. But when they paved this last time, they didn't go back and recut that down or get all the accumulated sand out. We didn't get the sand taken out this year. We didn't get the dead wood picked up this year. So from that point, a mile down to Maple Street, actually that little piece of Maple Street that goes to east, that I'll include that in this. Although I think I've seen some wood picked up there, and I don't know if it was the resident or whether the town came. A little bit of both, I'm told. Okay, I encourage you to drive down it from the East Street direction and then try driving down it the other. And we now have a couple community homes on the street, and they have van vehicles, and they're often in a rush to pick up people. It's a very dangerous situation. So,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
One other question. I'm sorry. You said that you had called.
Nancy.
Nancy.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. You said that you had called. Who have you spoken to?
I know you spoke with me, and I did get.
Okay.
I have spoken to her. I've made several phone calls. When the road was first finally paved again 3 seasons ago, there were lots of comments to people, and I was assured by Gary that it wasn't staying this way, that there'd be another layer put on before the winter came. But we didn't get another layer. And then we were patient the next year, and we didn't get another layer. And it's already starting to come up. And then this last winter, it's like we got totally forgotten with the dead wood pickup, with the street sweeping. They did come by and clean up the brush, but they went over the logs. They didn't pick the limbs up. They didn't pick the limbs up.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Try driving down it. Go in the morning with the school buses. That's another problem. The school buses that they are sending out for the kids from the high school are too large for our streets. And I can say that with some authority after being on a regional school district and revamping their transportation system. The buses are too large to safely navigate our roads here in Carlisle, not just Brook Street, but a lot of streets. And they should be getting a couple smaller buses instead of adding on to a big bus. And it's better for our students too, because a big bus takes longer to fill up and the smaller bus takes less. And you send the smaller buses further out. It actually makes sense.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
No. Sorry about that. Yes.
My name is George Vendura. I live on Maple Street. I spoke to you on the phone, Nathan, a couple of weeks ago. My issue is also the deer issue. Okay, we know that it is ordered. The deer hunt was ordered by the Board of Selectmen. Ordered. It was led by the Deer Committee. Led. It's managed by the Conservation Committee. Managed. Lots of verbs. Ordered, led, managed. But it's still murky. The hunt is going to end in a few days anyway, so one might think it's irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. It sounds officious, ordered, led, managed. But the mosquito editorial of October 12th, a couple of weeks ago, said it all. It said it responsibly, emphatically, and succinctly, and it also offered a resolution. We're now mired in a non-resolution bandying about strong verbs. Okay, it's not necessary. What the mosquito editorial said is the Carlisle Board of Selectmen has exceeded its authority. Sounds very authoritative. Ordered, led, managed. It's irrelevant. The Carlisle Board of Selectmen has exceeded its authority in even going ahead with the hunt. As early as 2015, we all know that this was voted upon at a town meeting as a town meeting issue to be decided by all the people. It has not been in that town meeting. It has not been decided by all the people. You went ahead with it anyway, despite the fancy verbs. The deer hunt must be decided by the people, not the Board of Selectmen, as the vote indicated. Without that, we don't have a democracy here in Carlisle, and the citizens are not getting a fair voice in their own government. The deer hunt must be halted immediately, even though you will drag your feet until November 25th and you will think it's a moot point. But the deer hunt must be halted immediately, November 13th preferably, as we talked about a week or two ago, on that date preferably, which is now passed. The deer hunt must be halted immediately until the town's citizens have officially spoken the way they're supposed to have spoken in the first place. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Stephen Smith. I'm on the Conscom and on the Deer Committee as well. I just want to clarify one thing. The Deer Committee is the committee that manages the deer hunt, not Conscom. Conscom merely just provides some minor administrative help through making the signs and stuff. But the Deer Committee is the actual committee that does the management of the hunt, not Conscom. So I just thought I'd clarify that.
Okay, anybody else for public input? All right, let's move on to the next topic. Carlisle 4-H.
Stand over to this side here and maybe
Pull that whole thing.
Is this down? Okay. So this just, it doesn't project our voice, but they can hear, and there's a camera up there. So,
It doesn't move the podium so that the camera.
okay.
And so that
And
people
the
can see her.
I'm not gonna knock it over. No.
That's all right.
Well,
You
maybe.
knock it over.
We'll see, we'll find out. Okay. So, I'm Vanessa Maroney, and we're here for the Carlisle Creators 4-H Club, and I'm being accompanied tonight up here by, could you want to introduce yourself?
Ariana.
By Ariana Jacob, who is our vice president of the club. We just voted on officers at our last meeting, our first real meeting. And Ariana is in second grade at CPS. And we have a lot of members of the Carlisle Creators over here. You can, yes, if you want to stand up.
You stand up?
Do you want to stand up, everybody? So, and we're missing a few members, but basically, so 4-H is a lot about community service and civics engagement and communications, public speaking, and we are going to be trying to learn a little bit about parliamentary procedure and how to run a meeting, and we thought that we would observe you tonight for a little bit, maybe not as long as we might have wanted to tonight, but and Robert's Rules of Order, right? And so maybe Ariana, you can help me by handing out. We can actually pass these to Tim, and ask him to hand. Tim is right here. Tim is our town administrator, and we're going to in these folders. If you could all just take one and look at it at your leisure. Is just a little bit of information about the 4-H program, and yeah, that is for Mary yelled already. Just about the same thing. And if you are familiar with the 4-H program, that's great. Feel free to pass it along to whomever. But we just wanted to let you know so that the club is in its second year. So we're really just kind of getting our feet wet still. And this year we're trying to learn a little bit more about civics and parliamentary procedure. And do you want to just go up and say thank you for letting us be at the meeting today? No. So thank you so much for having us on your agenda. We greatly appreciate it, and I know your time is running short. So I think we might have some things if you want to, and
so
we'll step back over here. I think we might have some recognition.
Everybody might
Just come on up.
Yeah, come on up.
So kids, why don't you come on up?
Everybody
okay.
for 4-H.
Good clarification.
And this is Nathan Brown. He's the chair of the Board of Selectmen. So he's responsible for running the whole. And he could have a gavel up here and everything to.
It's all his fault.
Well, welcome here tonight. Not sure how long you're going to stay, but I hope that you enjoy it and that you see how it all works. And Vanessa certainly can also talk to you about how it all works. Perfect person for that, having sat right here.
And survived. Yeah, sort of.
So I do have some certificates here for each of you. Graham. Michaela. There you go. Matthew. Mariana. Hello. Orla. Aiden. And Max. Caleb?
Nope.
Caleb. For as long as you're able to stay.
Thank you. Thank you. We can sit down and then I'll give you the signal and then move on. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, do you want me to move this back or?
Okay, so moving on, maybe continuing the topic of the deer hunting. So when we approved the deer hunt for this year, it was as a pilot program to see how it went and whether or not we felt it should continue and be brought before town meeting as an ongoing program. And so I just wanted to, as we're getting close to the end of the.
I'm sorry, could you speak up or put the mics on, because we can't hear you?
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, these don't project, so I'll have to just speak up.
Thank you.
Okay, if it starts coming back down again, just let me know. So I wanted just to make sure that we got it on our schedule to talk about, I'm not sure, there was somebody here from the Deer Committee. And so if you wouldn't mind, just come on up and there's a chair there, we need 3 chairs. All the way up.
That's the magic sinking chair.
All the way on up. Come on up to the table.
And you bring your chair up.
Sure. We can bring this chair around. Can we stand it?
No,
Grab the chair.
there's a chair here.
You can grab that.
Yeah. The problem with that chair is that it.
We only have more. We must have more magic sinking chairs that have taken away.
Do you want to speak?
Just so everybody knows what we're talking about, there's a couple of the chairs that just sink over time. And so at the end of the meeting, you find that you're kind of on the floor.
Get your chin on the table there.
Okay.
That
So.
doesn't project, it's just for the camera, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to chat with you all about what our process will be for evaluating the hunt, how you'll be getting some feedback back. Obviously, you'll be getting some today, but how we'll get feedback back and kind of like what the next steps moving forward would be based upon kind of what we decided last year, or last spring. And so you recently had a meeting to get feedback, or?
Okay. So just for clarification, there are 3 members of the Deer Committee here. There's Kerry, myself, My name's Dan Boyanich. I'm the actual deer agent, and Steve, who represents the Conservation Commission. We also have several other members, but they're not here today. We obviously haven't got any sort of presentation as such to give, so I can just give a very brief overview. The committee's been meeting once a month, approximately, probably for the past 15, 16 months. And in that time, we've gone through a lot of different sort of procedures and processes. We've put into place regulations which have been reviewed and approved by the Board of Selectmen. We've been involved in reviewing the various parcels of land. There are 5 properties that are currently being hunted. We looked at location for the hunters. We looked at parking availability. We assessed what was required from the hunters. We interviewed the hunters, and basically we have managed the program and helped to implement it. I'm actually one of the hunters as well, because we gave priority to residents and employees of the town. So in summary, what we have got is we have 18 hunters in total. 7 of those are residents of the town, and we put in very strict criteria with respect to selection of the individuals. So no other town has actually done this, but we wanted to set the bar very, very high. So all hunters, as a matter of course, have to have hunter education certificates, and it's a 17-hour course which is undertaken by Mass Wildlife, by the state. In addition to that, we insisted that all the hunters had bow hunter education certificates. That's a separate course that's actually provided by Mass Wildlife. Like I say, no other town has actually requested that of any of the hunters, so we believe that we've actually set much higher standards than any other town in the state. We have been getting advice from other towns with respect to signage, with respect to what experiences they've had, how they've implemented it, and basically what we followed was the Dover model. Dover's been running their program since 2009, and it was very, very useful to actually have a town which was same sort of surface area as Carlisle, similar sized population, to give us at least sort of an idea as to what to expect and how to actually implement it. So the deer agent from the town of Dover was very helpful, and we had him over here, and we asked lots of questions from him. So the hunt's been going on since October the 1st. It's archery only, and the state allows archery through to December the 31st. We actually, based upon feedback from members of the community here, we decided to actually curtail the program to November the 24th. That is the archery only season. After that, people can use shotgun and muzzleloader in other places, but we decided, okay, that was a decent cutoff point for us to be able to actually at least evaluate the pilot program and see how things have gone. So like I said, 18 hunters, 5 parcels of land. We've been getting feedback from people, questions and so on, and what we have published on the web, and it's on our web page, is a series of frequently asked questions, and we're constantly adding to those. And the purpose of that really is to try and avoid repetition and to be able to actually make it available to people, so that if anybody's got any questions about hunting in general or hunting specifically in Carlisle, that's the place to go to. And I believe the Selectmen have all received copies. The latest version has actually got a few more questions added to it based upon recent questions that have been asked. So in terms of how it's been going, the feedback from the hunters has been very positive in terms of their interaction with members of the public. They've had a lot of support from people they've actually met on the trails. Obviously, we have had input from individuals who are not supportive of the hunt, and we do listen to them and have incorporated some of their requests into, like say, the program, such as curtailing it and cutting the whole program by 5 weeks. What we have got to date is 6 deer have actually been harvested as such out of 18 hunters. By way of comparison, the only data that I've got actually is from 2012, which is Dover. That was in their 3rd year. So they started in 2009, like I've said. So 3 years into their program, they actually had 58 hunters. They actually hunted until December the 31st, and they had 29 deer harvested. So if you want to choose a statistic, that's 50%. So 58 hunters, 29 deer for a full season. We've actually got 18 hunters, 6 deer harvested to date. We've still got just under 2 weeks to go. And like I say, we're curtailing it for November the 24th. So I think, you know, loosely we're just about on track with what Dover actually produced in 2012. So I would say the hunter's actually gone okay so far. It's been a very slow start, but things are picking up. The rut is underway at the moment, and so I anticipate that we'll probably get, you know, 2, 3, maybe 4 more deer by the end of the season.
I just want to clarify one thing, because there seems to be some confusion as to whether there's what sort of hunting is going to be allowed on our public lands.
Right.
So.
Okay, glad you asked that, because obviously there's been questions about the signage as such. So, Conservation Commission signage says no hunting, okay, and that actually, in alignment with what Mass Wildlife's definition of hunting covers a whole range of species. It goes from squirrel, turkey, rabbit, you can, you know, probably about 30, 40 different species. What Carlisle has instituted is a single species hunt in order to manage the ecosystem, and that's where the deer comes in. So this is specifically a deer hunt, and it's archery only. It doesn't.
And it will not turn into anything else later, muzzle loading or whatever.
Correct. It's archery only. We're in control of that. It's our town. We've decided that that's what we want to implement, and it's only for one species, which is deer. So it's a deer management program, which I think is consistent with the no hunting signage that the Conservation Commission has. I've actually checked that with Town Council, explained that this is a specific hunt for a single species, and he thought there was no real contradiction in terms of the signage. He said that was pretty consistent in his understanding, that it was pretty obvious what was going on.
So, you know, we did very early on get feedback about the signage. Have we done anything to change that?
We initially had some signs which were letter size, and based upon feedback, and in fact we actually agreed with it, you know, after reviewing it, we decided to actually revise the signs. The signs are now much bigger. They're actually double the height and width. They're very visible, they're yellow, and the wording has been reduced so that, you know, they're much clearer in terms of the message that's been conveyed. And those signs were replaced, I think, about probably 2 to 3 weeks into the program, I think. Yeah.
And so those signs say what now?
I've got a picture of it somewhere, but
okay.
Basically it just says deer hunt in progress. This is a limited hunt, and all hunters have been screened by the town, and it's got the dates of the hunt as well.
And it's placed very prominently now at the trail entrances?
It's placed at all the entrances to the various properties, yeah.
And so we have 2 more weeks of the hunt, right? That's what you said?
It finishes on a week on Saturday. It's the last day.
Okay, so a week and a half.
Yeah.
After the hunt.
Right.
And what should our process be for evaluation? Or what process might you go through, and then how might we be involved in that?
Well, what we are obviously doing is comparing it to other towns, and I've already quoted the Dover figures to try and get a sort of realistic estimate as what would be considered an acceptable sort of figure. So we do have a metric. I think that's all we can say with respect to, you know, the number of deer and so on. I mean, some people are very concerned about the deer being sort of taken out of Carlisle altogether. But, you know, I think we have a number which is reasonable based upon experience from another town. in terms of the impact of reducing the deer population, that's going to be a very difficult one because on the one hand, it has to be over several years for the population to be decreased. And then the time it takes for the forests to recover will also be another few years. So the lag time in terms of being able to say this is a successful program and that this is the impact it has on the forests it's going to take a while to get that. We could, I suppose, do some statistics in terms of the reduction in the number of deer collisions and so on, but I think a statistician would probably say that's within the noise level, that it's going to be very difficult to actually assess. So one thing we can say is we do know that there are 6 less deer at the moment, and therefore there are 6 less deer that could potentially impact with cars. There are 6 less deer that would actually sort of contribute to overbrowsing of the forests and so on. But how to actually say whether we should or shouldn't go ahead with this based upon a hard figure, it's going to be very difficult to actually sort of decide. I think we just have to work on guidance from Mass Wildlife. I mean, they are saying that the deer is overpopulated in this area, and we can say that more and more towns are introducing deer hunting in order to manage the deer population, and we're just doing our part in order to be able to help out in that way. Mass Wildlife issued 12,000 surplus deer permits, doe permits, for Zone 10. Zone 10 covers basically everything north of the Mass Pike and east of the 495, so it's that sector. And Carlisle is in Zone 10, covers a lot of other towns as well.
You said 12,000?
12,000 doe permits. That's just the female deer.
From 495 down to Route 90.
Correct.
12,000 surplus extras.
Yes.
Females.
Females.
Not only females.
Yeah. The issue is that the demographics are changing. There are less and less hunters every year. The population is aging out, and there aren't that many young hunters to replace it. So, but the deer population is increasing. So obviously they're trying to encourage the existing hunters to actually hunt more deer.
So by giving them more than one?
Yes. Yes. And it's all strictly controlled as well. I mean, a hunter can't just go and just shoot a deer. He has to have the appropriate permits and so on. And once a deer is harvested, all that data goes back to Mass Wildlife. So basically they have complete figures in terms of how many deer are taken in each town. And we do have historical figures for Carlisle. Carlisle has historically been producing somewhere between 20 and 40 deer a year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2018 and how much of that has been from the hunt as opposed to from private properties.
And that's through bow hunting on private property.
Yeah.
Private property and Great Meadows, maybe? Or
Only bow hunting?
No. As far as firstly, as far as the town is concerned, it's archery only for a limited season which ends on November the 24th. As far as private property is concerned in Carlisle, with the owner's permission, so it could be the owner or it could be another hunter that has permission from the owner, they can actually hunt whatever is legal at the time. So archery season is usually from, this year it was from October the 1st through to November the 24th. On the Monday after Thanksgiving, for 2 weeks, is shotgun season. That means anybody in Carlisle on private property can use a shotgun to shoot a deer. They can also use archery as well. It's their choice. 2 weeks after shotgun, we have muzzleloader season, and then they can use a muzzleloader for 3 weeks. They can also use archery. One thing I just forgot to mention is during shotgun season you can also use muzzleloader, so there are overlapping parts to it. But basically you can use a firearm such as a shotgun or muzzleloader after the Monday after Thanksgiving all the way through to December the 31st. And that's all included in those statistics. So that's not
I wanted that to clarify,
right,
because I think people need to understand
that
deer have been taken in Carlisle with guns, and some of those private properties are contiguous with some of our publics, and some people actually, unbeknownst to themselves, basically trespass on those private properties and have been probably in the line of fire, or possibly could have been in the line of fire, without knowing it.
And so, do you know how many of those 40 to 60 you said are from Great Meadow, and does Great Brook stay there?
Okay, I don't know what the figures are for Great Meadows.
Okay.
Great Meadows is archery only.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be hunters in Great Meadows all the way through to December the 31st, but it's archery only. As far as Great Brook is concerned, that's no hunting.
Okay.
The average is about, I think it was from 2000 to 2017, I think it was about 31 deer per year. And the standard deviation was about 5 or 6.
From Carlisle.
From Carlisle.
20 to 40 is
Yeah.
the range.
And but some of those probably, I also assume, have been taken on our public lands illegally.
Quite possibly, yeah. Sure.
We don't
We don't know.
We can't tell.
Yeah.
So it seemed to me like part of what we would want to be evaluating, and perhaps the easiest part to, because I understand the statistics in 1 year isn't really statistically significant to understand what the impact is going to be on.
We can't hear you again.
I'm sorry. I was saying that just in talking about the types of things that we want to evaluate in going forward, I do think that when we were talking about instituting this, some of the things that I was concerned about was just making sure that in this pilot program we knew, how we were going to manage it. We knew that it was manageable. We knew, were there going to be people who were interested in it? Were there enough deer taken to make it worth our effort? And the safety and what we learned through it. I mean, I think early on the sign issue came up. It seemed, in the pictures we saw, we had a sign issue, and you addressed that, and maybe that's something to look into, even improving more or evaluating that for next year, and just kind of taking a look at all of the components of it rather than just are we taking the right number of deer or not? I think it's going to be hard to know that after 1 year. If we get 6 in that many days, I guess maybe it's going to pick up, as you were saying, because they're starting to run. You're certainly seeing them out on the road a lot more now, which.
Yeah.
So
the 5 properties, are the 6 that have been taken distributed among those 5? Or are they grouped?
Okay, so four were taken from one was taken from Benfield, 4 were taken from Davis, and 1 was taken from Town and Forest.
There are more hunters in Davis too, isn't there?
There are 8 hunters in Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah, they need to come to my backyard. That's where they all are.
So the way we decided how many hunters went to each property were based upon, like I say, the lie of the land, what we considered was appropriate deer hunting property, and also parking was very important consideration. And Davis has actually got 4 access points, and so we put 8 hunters in there.
And I know that you said this to us before, and I'm just not recalling exactly what the number was, but is there a difference in how far you need to be away from a resident if you're bow hunting than if you are shotgun hunting?
As far as Massachusetts is concerned, the state doesn't discriminate their definition of a firearm when it comes to hunting. So archery, shotgun, muzzleloader, they're all 500 feet. That's the discharge point. So where you actually fire the weapon has to be 500 feet or greater from a private property, unless the owner gives permission.
From a dwelling, or from the property edge?
From a dwelling.
It's I think they call it an occupied property. So whether a shed is occupied or not.
What somebody might think of as my property. It's wherever you're living.
It's from the
build.
It's from a structure, not from the plot line.
Yeah. It's not the property boundary.
Yeah.
I think one thing needs to be said is that safety was probably the primary concern in terms of everything from how many hunters, where they were placed, how high they were in a tree, shooting away from a trail, 100 feet from the trail, shooting down and away from the trail. and qualifications and capabilities of the hunters themselves, and the background checks and everything. So safety was very important, and yet it's still not easy to discern. For example, the state has certain rules about when they recommend that you wear orange during hunting season, whenever that is, which part of the season it is. And there have been questions why aren't we posting on the signs for you to wear orange when walking the trails? And yet that's not what the state recommends for this hunt at all. And,
So just to be clear, the state mandates hunters to wear orange during shotgun and muzzleloader seasons, not during archery season. Archery is considered a very safe activity, and in Massachusetts history there hasn't been a single incident where a member of the public or a dog has been injured by an archer. It's never happened.
The range isn't far enough. By the time the animal gets in the range, they can recognize what the thing
Typically
is.
you're shooting at around 20, 25 yards, 30 yards absolute max. You're shooting from 20 feet up. You're shooting down in a downward direction. Arrows don't ricochet and fly off for hundreds of yards. That doesn't happen. So it's a very, very safe activity. And like I say, in Massachusetts recorded history, there has never been an incident. No, law enforcement in any town has never been called because of an incident. So we, like Kerry says, safety is absolutely paramount. And like I said right at the beginning, we actually instituted this program mandating that all hunters have bow hunter education certificates. We were actually approached by a lot of hunters who said they don't need this because they've been hunting for 40 years, and we rejected them. We said, go on the course, we'll put you on the wait list, but you have to go on the course. And like I say, no other town in the state has actually requested that as a requirement. So I think, there's no more that we could do in terms of raising the bar. We got it right up there, and I think we've had some very, very good candidates as hunters, and like I say, their interactions with members of the public have been very good.
So I have two more questions. One is, first of all, how did people learn about the hunt? The hunters, how did they learn that Carlisle now provided, allowed hunting?
There are two different ways. There was word of mouth, and also we actually had 2 announcements in the Mosquito, public announcements.
And secondly, earlier today we had somebody come up and talk about, how long we were giving them to take down the stand. Could you talk a little bit about why the 3 weeks and the thought process there?
A lot of the hunters have got jobs, and during the day, and in their spare time they hunt. So we thought it was a reasonable thing to actually ask them to actually take down their stands on a Sunday. I don't know if anybody, you all know this, but there is no hunting in Massachusetts on Sundays. It's banned statewide. So Sunday is a good day for a hunter to actually go in and take their stands down. We thought 2 weeks would be reasonable. We thought 2 weeks and a day gives them 3 Sundays instead of 2 Sundays, and that would be a reasonable thing for them to be able to take their stands down. The stands are pretty well concealed. I think the probability of an illegal hunter going in there, accidentally finding a stand and then using it, I think is extremely low to non-existent. I think it's not going to happen. If an illegal hunter is going to come in, they want to be as covert as possible. I think it's going to be very unlikely that they'll want to use a stand and find it in the first place.
And so you said that it's 2 weeks and 1 day, or is it 3 weeks and 1 day?
It's 2 weeks and 1 day. So the hunt finishes on November the 24th, and there are 3 Sundays, with the next Sunday being the 25th of November, the following Sunday, and the following Sunday after that. So it's 2 weeks and a day, effectively gives them 3 Sundays. They probably haven't got any time during the rest of the week to be able to take down their stands if they're working and or hunting, and we just thought that was reasonable. 18 hunters, that's, remember, the deadline. A lot of them are going to take down their stands much earlier, but we're giving them a deadline to be able to do that. Like I say, we've discussed this at the committee, and we thought this was reasonable.
Is there pre-hunt time that they're allowed to put up their stand?
Yeah, this year we had to rush a bit because the mosquito unfortunately issued the second announcement 2 weeks too late. So we had to rush the whole program, but we managed to get all the interviews done, quarry checks performed, and I think the hunters had like 2 weeks before the actual hunt started to be able to actually put their stands in. So in that period they were allowed to actually put their stands in. We gave them, I think it was exactly 2 weeks if I recall right. That gave them the opportunity to actually scout, put their stands in. But they weren't allowed to hunt obviously until opening date, which was October the 1st.
And did everybody put their stand in before the hunting season started?
No, some of them put them in later.
Mr. Mahonik, have you had any secret meetings that you can't discuss without public, with public being there?
Denise?
I'm sorry, Etha's talking about safety and they
I
had a
understand,
meeting.
but nobody can hear you, so you're
Oh.
gonna need to be recognized by the chair.
Yeah, just 1 second. I just want to ask the board if they have any meetings before I open it up. I mean, meetings, if any.
Yeah, questions.
Any
Well,
questions?
one sort of elephant in the room about this whole thing is that I think there's a general feeling, I wasn't on the select board at the time that all this began, but there was a town meeting when a vote, non-binding vote was taken. It was during the time when everybody was getting Lyme's disease, whether they knew it or not. I was afraid of that, and the deer were the problem, and subsequently that has changed into protecting the understood in the forest area. But at that town meeting, there were, I think, 4-1 folks voted that, yeah, we should have the opportunity to have a deer hunt, a bow hunt, to manage the deer population. So it was fairly overwhelmingly positive toward doing it. And then subsequent to that, the selectmen looked and said, well, do we have to have a town meeting to vote on this, or is this within our purview to make the decision to hunt or not as select persons? And legal counsel said, I think at that time, the selectmen can make that decision, and did, thinking that the sentiment in the town was overwhelmingly in favor of doing something about the deer population. So I think the fact that it never went to a vote at the town meeting, specifically at the town meeting, and some folks expected that that was going to take place, I think that's whole part of this whole angst about process. Did we do this right? And I guess I gotta say, if anyone wants to have another vote or have a vote at town meeting, there's a process to go through to put this on the ballot at town meeting. That's not an easy process to get a ballot vote at the town meeting by design, but that process does exist. So this was a pilot. We called it a pilot. We hope we could learn from it. We hope we could do it better next year if we continue to go and do it next year. We think it's productive. But, you know, if the town feels, and folks feel strongly, this ought to go to a vote of the town, whether or not we should, as selectmen, should have the right to mandate it, then that's the process we could go through. You know, so, and I think to characterize, Jeannie, you know, I respect you greatly, and I know you well. I think to characterize your interaction as basically being stonewalled or not being heard, you've been heard at every meeting that you've attended, and you've attended just about every one that I've been at, and recorded some of them. And you may not like the fact that no one felt the need to change anything or stop the hunt immediately, but they didn't. And the Deer Committee was put in place to implement the program, not to decide whether or not it should continue, not to decide anything but, not to decide anything except should it be managed well. And that's their mission. And so, I mean, it wouldn't make sense for you to be in a committee whose mission is to implement the, you know, the deer, and that's just my, I mean to goad you about that, but that's wouldn't make any sense for you to be in that committee, to be a dissenting vote on the committee every time they met to say, we gotta shut this down, when you know that the committee's charter is to implement it.
I beg to differ when they recognize me, okay?
Well, he asked you, you can reply to him.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Could you reply at the
Yeah, just
microphone
come up
so
here a
that
second.
the-
Okay, I beg to differ right off the start, because my first inclination on this deer hunt was the safety. Obviously, the safety of people is the most important part. I am against the deer hunt because of the deer, but safety obviously trumps anything else. It was myself who brought up the signage. If I had been part of that deer committee in the first place, that signage would not have been an issue. I would have seen it. And you need an opposing voice just for those ideas. And there's no way in the whole world when you have, I forget how many are allowed, 7 people, and if you have one person that you know is opposed, there is no way that if everyone else is for what's happening, that I'm going to win the vote. If anything, I'm going to put an opposite voice in, or an opposing voice, which is going to make people think about what are they doing. And that is why I beg to differ with that.
Yeah, Jeannie made some good points with respect to the signage.
Right.
You know, you improve them, you must admit. They are improved
I
by
think
what
they're
they were.
improved, but I disagree with the legal, because to me, no hunting means no hunting. It should say if there's no hunting but exception for deer, it should say that on the big signage that says no hunting except for deer.
So you're already up here if you want to continue to.
Oh, okay, great.
You don't have to get up and down, up and down.
Okay, this is great. There's so many things. I do ask for chance, that I'm obviously very intense on this, and I want to be polite. And I do want a chance to basically talk about the negative aspects or the incomplete aspects. For instance, the understory question, it has not been brought up about any areas within Carlisle that they will be looking at. So even if the wait is for several years, we don't know what we're waiting on. And there was no information brought up about Dover. Dover's been doing this at least since 2009. It's 2018. So Dover should have a very good idea of how it affected their understory. So I'm opposed against the idea of hunting for the sake of hunting. Another question I have is, there was a meeting, I went to the Deer Committee meeting, I think I'm a thorn in the side of everyone here, and there was a private meeting. We had to leave the meeting because there was a discussion about a hunter that basically had behavioral problems. We were assured that it wasn't one of the, we were verbally assured that it was not one of the 18 that was hunting, but I don't know, I don't really know. My question is, if it's a person who hasn't been approved and who is not allowed on town land, why would anyone even bring it up, and why would they be concerned? So if this person is on the list, that person obviously should be immediately pulled off of the list, and there shouldn't be a secret meeting or a private meeting that talks about this. So that's another thing about the safety issue. As far as the town meeting is concerned, the Lyme disease was one of the initial reasons why we went into it. The Lyme disease has not proven to be, the deer have not been proven to be the cause of this epidemic in Lyme disease. And in fact, new research is showing the fact that the deer may actually be protecting us from Lyme disease, because if a tick bites a deer, it does not contract Lyme disease from the deer, and it dilutes the effect of the animals that do pass it. One of the jokes I have that I tell friends is a lot of the main culprits are little tiny white mice, but it's kind of silly if you kill little white mice and put their heads on the wall. You have to have a lot of heads to mount up to be the size of a deer head. So it actually may be that that the deer are actually protecting us. And let's see, the number of deer killed this so far on the 6th, there are 6 deer have been killed. How many are doe and how many are the bucks right now?
4 bucks, 2 does.
So basically the number, right away we say, okay, we have 4 bucks and we're after the doe and we're killing the bucks and not the doe. So apparently it's not working the way they've expected it to work. I did ask the deer committee what their criteria was when I first went to the first deer committee deer committee meeting, and I did not hear an answer immediately. It was waited, and it was basically waited and waited and waited, and finally Steve Tobin spoke up, and it said the number of deer killed. So we really don't even have a criteria for the deer killed. We don't know if the deer are helpful for us. We don't have any statistics in Carlisle, studies about what areas we're going to examine. There is no proof from Dover, and right now we have a total of 6 deer killed, and maybe in the next 2 weeks, 2 to 4 more deer. Okay, this is, and now looking at that, we look at the state parks. The state park, Great Brook State Park, if the deer are such a problem, I would have expected the state parks also to allow deer hunting, but they do not allow deer hunting. So the parks that we have here, our town lands, are our town parks. And I am nervous about walking wherever any hunter is, whether, I think if I get shot by a safe arrow, I will be as dead as if I were shot by a bullet that hit in the same location. So I don't base, well, we haven't had it happen before as a guideline for safety. All you need is 1 death, and that goes your safety. Anyway, I do want the opportunity that when there is a really serious question about has this deer hunt be successful, that I be allowed to participate, and I politely ask that. And let's see, one other thing I wanted to say. Oh, as far as the town meeting again, the town meeting was not if we should have a deer hunt, but should we take it to town meeting so people can discuss it. And I think if that same town meeting was held today, you wouldn't have the 4-to-1 ratio, because people were terrified of the Lyme disease connection when that vote was being taken. So, thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you. Yes.
I like Mr. Kissinger's presentation tonight. I think it was lucid. It goes back to the Carlisle mosquito editorial. When the vote was taken in 2015, there was a very large Lyme disease scare going on. People were very concerned. Everybody was had it or was going to die from it. Okay, and that's what instituted that vote. And the vote was limited. The vote wasn't council put aside. It wasn't a vote that the Board of Selectmen could decide. It was a vote that it should be something that the Board of Selection might decide if we give them permission. So it was a 2-tiered thing. Council feels that you had the authority. The town perhaps feels it doesn't. Kerry basically said, what's the big deal? And I say the same thing. Just put it back into the town meeting. It's a little bit more cumbersome, and this controversy will go away. We don't have a criterion, with all due respect. 6 deer out of 20,000 is nothing. Supposedly, where we have to go to wildlife, or mass wildlife, is that what it's called, for these 20,000 permits, and they say there's 30 to 40 deer per square mile. There's not 30 to 40 deer to a square mile if we're only getting 6 from a 2-month hunt. So those statistics are in question. And as he pointed out, we'll never know what the long-term effects are statistically. So this thing is a big can of worms, and we've forged ahead. We have committees, we have subcommittees, we have deer committees, and management. Let's talk about Dover. Dover, and counting numbers against Dover, but Dover, perhaps, their numbers are based on town forest. We have stuff going in our conservation lands where the citizens walk trails. So the fact that there has been no arrows between anybody's heads historically might be because those were town forests that weren't populated by people who looked at their town lands as park. If we take our model from parks, it would be Great Brook and there'd be no hunting. If we take our model as Dover and it's only town forest, that's a different statistic, and yeah, there are no arrows through no heads. Okay, because that's the forest, and people are not used to the culture of walking into those forests because they're not parks, they're not trail monitored. Our so-called hunting areas more mimic Great Brook, not town forests. So the fact that there's a statistic that said nobody ever got an arrow through the ear is based on, I'll call it, more populated, more towns and areas of deer hunting that are populated by forest mentality, not park mentality. So there's so many statistics here and different points of view, as I'm trying to bring up, that need to be discussed. And we can't discuss and we can't decide, so we're going to be arguing back and forth. So simply put it back onto the vote where it belongs. And let the people decide. Because it's just too sticky and we're never going to be able to figure this out without it. It's a little slower, but Kerry had the right idea and is consistent with democracy and what we need in this point. One last thing. They say the signage has been changed. But there's been a lot of resistance with the Conservation Committee, as well as the Deer Committee, saying, well, that sign, it shouldn't be a danger sign or a warning sign, because there is no danger. Well, then what are you putting a sign up in the first place? Why are you making it twice as big, and why are you changing the color? So there's an implicit, contradiction of terms here. On one hand, there's no danger, and on the other hand, there is a danger, but they insist the signs shouldn't be enlarged, but they did. They insisted that the sign shouldn't be condensed in language, but it was. And this is all to elevate the fact that there's a danger. Yet there's the big wooden sign that says no hunting, and people are still walking not on the paths but in the weeds, because the culture here is that it's a park. You don't have to stay on the trail. So we have all sorts of contradictions. We have a sign that says, on the wooden thing says no hunting. Another thing that's a sign that says hunting of progress, but everybody insists, or some people insist, conservation people, Board of Selectmen people, as well as Deer Committee people, oh, it's really not a danger sign. Then why are they orange and twice as big now? So it's kind of, this should come up for discussion. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody. Carrie had it right. Let's go back. The pilot is great, but by next year, let's put it on the agenda and have the meeting that we're supposed to and let the people decide. And nobody will be embarrassed. No committee has done anything wrong, being led or ordered or managed. Just pass it to the people and let it air out the way it should.
George, I'm not advocating that route.
Okay, but say yes, of course.
But I'm saying it certainly is available to the town.
Fine. Okay, I am advocating it, but I like the fact that at least you brought it up.
Well, I have been so impressed with the way folks in this committee have walked all these parcels, walked every one of them, sometimes up to their calves in
Poison ivy.
water.
Oh, poison ivy.
and poison ivy.
Right.
And they're deer hunters, many of them themselves. They personally interviewed each of these folks that applied.
Yes.
They collected the credentials that they had to have in order to be approved. They actually made them demonstrate their capability by taking them to the Rod and Gun Club in Concord, putting them up on a 20-foot platform and making them shoot at a target. I mean,
Yes.
they put them through all the paces, and I've seen a stand, and I've walked to a stand from the trail, and if anyone is shooting from that stand away from the trail, safety is absolutely, I mean, I have no problem. I walk on Margie Finley's land behind our house and then across the Conant land all the time. I've never seen anybody out there, but I've never, ever felt unsafe. And in order to get to the trail that I walk on, I have to walk right through the woods and through the muck and through the mire. Never felt any problems with it because of the way that the hunters themselves have described what they do when they're sitting up in a tree stand for
Yes.
3 hours at 4:30, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, waiting for someone to stop just below them so that they can get a clear, ethical shot, as they call it.
Absolutely.
I
agree.
Amazing.
I agree with that sentiment. I've been to the Deer Committee meetings, not just other people here. I've been to the conservation. There's not a person who isn't sincere and that didn't work hard. But the fact that, let me give you just a different example. The fact that you want to drive trucks across a marsh or the tundra and perhaps, and ruin the tundra or potentially ruin the tundra, you can have all the safety you want, that the wheels are right and the skids are right and the ground is frozen and all this stuff. But the question is, did you have to drive across the tundra in the first place? Assuming you did have to drive across it, these guys put all the bells and whistles in it so there's the least amount of damage. So forget the safety issue. Was it necessary in the first place, forgetting that they had to break their tails, to have the hunt in the first place? Now, two answers. You need the hunt because of Lyme disease. That's the issue, regardless of turning these guys on to manage it. Do you need the hunt in order to lower the foliage, okay, in order to keep the deer from eating your Christmas trees? If those were the two issues for the reason for the hunt in the first place, who cares how much work they did? They have been given orders to manage a hunt that shouldn't have been managed in the first place. Not that they didn't work. Not that they're not the most meticulous, competent managers of a hunt. But the question is they shouldn't have been called in because a hunt was not warranted because it was based on Lyme disease. Or it was based on the understudy. And those have disappeared. So therefore, regardless of how much they worked, and you put $100,000 in, and they all have wives and kids, and they vote Republican or Democrat, that's all irrelevant, because we're not trying to save the investment of these guys who worked their tails off. We're trying to get to the essence. Is the hunt next year, or the end of this hunt this year, relevant for the purpose of the hunt in the first place? Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, we'll take, I'm sorry, I did tell you to come up. There's somebody behind you that's pointing at you.
I'll be very quick. My name is Eva O'Keefe. I'm from Rocky Point Road here in Carlisle. I grew up with hunters in Buffalo, New York. The deer population became so significant that it was a bait and kill process that was allowed. Hunting went on constantly because of the overpopulation of deer. So I feel very badly. They're beautiful animals, but they have no control mechanism here in Carlisle. You have a very, very large population. You can introduce the wolves if you like. That's an option. I'd rather have these gentlemen are probably the most responsible hunters I have ever heard speak. So I'm very, very impressed with what you have done. And to assume that Lyme disease does not exist, you had a wonderful physician speak here in Carlisle, I believe at the library, from Beth Israel Deaconess. If you want to see the outcome of Lyme disease that is undiagnosed and untreated, it's significant. So I believe that, we have a responsibility as citizens here in Carlisle to maintain a balanced ecosystem, if you will. I don't know how else to do it with the deer population. If you had an alternative, I think it might be fine, but I don't think we do. And so I think you have to do something, and I really applaud all of your efforts to find a very reasonable and sustainable process. Dover has been doing this for a very, very long time. I used to live in Walpole. They're very successfully managing their deer population. It is a big concern, continues to be a big concern because of the area. It's also very rural. So that's it. Thank you.
I'll take just one more.
We have someone else speaking.
I would like to speak too. Can I go after something new that hasn't been mentioned at all?
Okay, yeah, we're just, sure.
Thank you.
I guess originally you wanted to know, I think the hunters can take it down to Sunday after the hunt ends. They're not working, most of them, I would think, are not working on a Sunday, and it's not a big deal to take it down, so why not do it then? The other thing is that there are some negative aspects. There was a dog that got into what was left by a hunter on Davis property and rolled in it, and the entrails of the deer were what he was rolling in. I don't know if Dan knows about that or not.
Yeah, well, one person claimed that a dog rolled in entrails. That person also said they didn't know whether it was our hunter. I contacted the two hunters in Davis.
You got 8 in Davis, I thought. In Davis you got 8, but from the location of it?
Seeing as I know that only 2 hunters got the deer, those are the ones I contacted. The ones who didn't get the deer obviously weren't involved in the process. And both of those were not involved in this.
So that was an illegal hunter then that killed a deer, and
I think the person who actually put the complaint in said it could have been coyotes who killed the deer. So it's an unknown basically, but it's not our hunters who.
Coyotes don't.
It could have been a hunter off private property. I just don't know, but it wasn't our hunters.
Coyotes don't leave part of the deer normally.
Just to be clear, it's in the regulations that the hunters are to take the entrails with them and dispose of them. So
supposed to.
It's in the regulations, of course. Yeah. But I think to assume that it's the hunters who did this, I think is unfair. I think we have to work on the assumption that these hunters are doing the right thing because it's in their interest to do it properly, and they are to take the entrails with them as they take the carcass of the deer out and dispose of the entrails. So I think at this stage, my understanding is that it wasn't our hunters that were involved. I do not know. As far as the coyote issue is concerned, it wasn't me who actually suggested this, it was the person who put the complaint and said it could have been a coyote, so I don't know. But it wasn't our hunters.
The other thing is that a number of people that we've talked to, particularly if they have dogs, will not go into the trails on the town forest. I don't know about some of the other properties, but most of the people, if they find out there's any kind of hunting going on, what they use for trails, will not go in. So I don't know what people often, if they're not aware of the hunting going on, but that's what we find. The other thing is, for the first time, we heard shots fired in the town forest, and this was, 2 Mondays ago?
Monday,
Which we've lived there for 31 years, and that's the first time that we've heard shots fired. And this was about 7:15 in the morning. And already a neighbor had reported it to the police, and what we observed, we did not report it to the police, but we observed, we got in a car and took a ride, and there were fresh tire marks coming out from close to the entrance to the town forest. Other than that, we didn't see any cars. We went down Maple Street and came back Brook Street and went home. And we did talk to the policeman, and he was just leaving, talking to a person that reported it on East Meadow. But that's the first time in 31 years we've heard gunshots from the town forest. Okay, do you want to say something?
No. Before I start, I just had one question. I went to a deer committee meeting and I asked about your procedures for cameras. So were the hunters allowed to put cameras up?
Well, I can't remember your question about cameras, but yes, they do have cameras up. I have a trap camera.
And I didn't see anything in the paper or making the town aware that if you go into our forests that they're possibly on camera. Do you have that they're under surveillance?
I can speak for myself, and that is that the camera is actually right where the tree stand is. So the camera is at least 100 feet away from a trail, and it's actually, the direction it's pointing is, it is pointing away from the trail, but my camera is within the shooting range of where the deer is.
But you have 18 hunters.
We do.
And they're allowed to change tree stands. I noticed from the last stuff, when you first presented this, it was that they had an approved tree stand, you were going to see it and approve it, and it wasn't going to change. But then I noticed that that's no longer the case, that they're allowed to put it up and just kind of tell you where it is.
It's always been the case that the hunters have one tree stand, that tree stand has a permit sticker on it, and they can put that tree stand anywhere within the designated area that they have been allocated.
And they can move it?
They can move it within, but it has to be within that designated area.
I don't believe that was the impression that I got attending the deer committee meeting from you. And I don't think it's well known to the town that there are all these cameras in our woods now. When I went to the deer committee meeting, I am knowledgeable about archery. I have a daughter who's an Olympic level archer. She was head of all outdoor archery events for the USOC USA Archery for several years leading up to the London Olympics. So I would like to just correct some things that were said, because there were a lot of I came to the meeting, I wasn't even going to be speaking about this, and I sat there and I was just overwhelmed with some information that I knew was inaccurate. So I would just like to comment on that. It was said at the deer committee meeting that these arrows don't go more than 100 feet. A compound has to be tuned to 25 to 30 pounds in order to kill a deer.
Incorrect. Legally, it has to be above 40 pounds.
Legally, it can be above 40 pounds. but it has to be at least 25 to 30 if you're using a recurve and a compound. But the compound actually has an accuracy of 430 yards. The 1987 world record was 1,162 yards at a 30-pound bow. So they go much farther than 100 feet. I had brought to your attention that there was a very common knock. Knock is the thing that holds the string at the end of the bow. And if it breaks, the arrow flies wild. I have seen that happen more than I would like to tell you. At competition, I have seen it go the length of 70 yards through a dormitory window and out of a dormitory window on the other side. I can tell you that if you go to an indoor competition in a gymnasium and there are high windows and an arrow has gone, you will see little tiny pinholes. It goes through the window so fast that it doesn't break the window. It leaves a little tiny hole. And you can see them in almost every competition. You can see these little tiny holes where the arrow has gone wild. It happens. It just happens. And it happens that there was a very common compound bow knock that had been deemed faulty. And I brought it to your attention that it was faulty because it would mean more arrows going wild. And I did so privately at the time, basically to give you guys the benefit of the doubt. As far as the Lyme disease thing goes, I think that they have not had a direct relationship for a long time with the deer, but a relationship that is coming to the front that they have found in Connecticut is that it's being spread by what you call red midges or spider mites, which we have here in Carlisle. The little red, tiny, do you know what I'm talking about? They look like little tiny specks of blood. They have been shown to have the Lone Star one, the one that if you get bit, you can't eat meat. So that's there. The other thing that concerned me was when Great Meadow opened up, and I mentioned this at the deer meeting. When Great Meadows opened up, almost immediately, I found somebody going through my property. So Great Meadows, the archery hunting was allowed on the other side of Brook Street, on a far part of Maple from me. They would have to cross the street, go through Grinnell, come across Brook. Then there's my property, and then I have area around behind me that doesn't extend to town forest, but is in that vicinity. I found a man in the back of my property, and he was very, when I went out and I said, "Hey, who are you? What are you doing?" And he was rather brusque with me. "I have a right to be here," he said. "I can go anywhere I want. I especially can go 6 to 8 feet on any side of a property line." He just started going off on me. And I said, "Who are you?" He wouldn't tell me. And in target archery, which is what my daughter did, there are always archers. And I know some of the unofficial rules or etiquette. You notify the property owner. You tell them you're going to be on their property, and then you go on, and if you find your deer on their property, you come back and you give them a gift. Anyways, second day, second guy shows up at my house, rings the doorbell, says he's really, really sorry about what happened. He was the guy who actually got archery allowed over at Great Meadows, and he's really sorry that this happened, and it shouldn't have happened, and yes, he should have knocked on the door, and really, really sorry. Please don't report me. Remember what he said. So I was concerned about no trespass, because how did this guy have permission to trespass on my property when we have this little sign with at night it has a little smiley face on it because somebody spray painted on it that there's no hunting in Carlisle without permission of the property owner. So what gave this guy the right to come onto my property? And so I called the police and I called the environmental officer in Massachusetts, and I found out a lot of stuff. And
Just 2 more minutes.
sure, basically, if you go on and you do a search for trespass laws in Massachusetts, we are one of the ones you don't have to get a sign, you don't have to post, you don't have to do anything, because it's assumed that they can't come on your property without your permission. And so they don't have any like ready-made signs that you can buy to put up for Massachusetts. They do for about half of the states. You don't have to paint your post purple. You don't have to post every 6 or 8 feet. I tracked that down. So far, it wasn't funny. But I called the environmental office and I talked to a person, and they tell me the following, that the environmental officer can deputize anybody he wants over the phone to go onto your property if you have a deer. So any one of the 1800s, any 18 hunters, if they wanted to go on, could be deputized over the phone to go on and follow a deer. It's very lax. I also found out that since the town does have that sign up, that protects us somewhat, but not from the environmental officer. So I would like to see the Board of Selectmen really come out with something strong about the trespass law, and just restate it if you want, but it needs to be restated. The current, well, I don't know if he's the current anymore because he was fired, suspended, or whatever, but the person who had been appointed to be the environmental officer had also been the person who was the NRA agent in the area, and he put this thing on the books that says it has to be posted. And I kept saying, well, where did he get that law from about trespass? Because that's not from Massachusetts. He didn't. He just, somehow he got this little paragraph passed. But it has no basis. It's like he made it up all by himself. But he told his officers that it doesn't have to be, I said, well, how many feet apart does it have to be? Because it doesn't say anything. It's very generic. And the guy lowered his voice and he said to me, we've been told that if they can walk onto your property and not hit a sign with your shoulder, that they're not close enough. And I, again, please implore you to make a really strong trespass statement, because I don't want a town that's littered with no trespass signs either. I don't think that goes a lot to the rural, nice community feeling that we have either. And it really is a change in how this community would be. And again, this selectman has tried to make sure that everybody who does something in this town has to pay for the costs that they incur. And I don't think that the amount that is being charged for these permits is covering the cost of signs. The Department of Health, I think when they came before the budget, said they need another person to administer this. They need to add a person at least half-time, from half-time to full-time. And the cost that it is to the rest of the residents. To me, it's not a deer or non-deer thing. I wouldn't go walking in the woods with hunting going on, knowing what I know and the holes I've seen in the windows. I just wouldn't do it. And I'm a taxpayer. And when do the 8 people out of 18, is that how many you said were from Carlisle? 7? When do the 7 people from Carlisle, when do their benefits outweigh? There's more than 7 people here from town. You know, when does it outweigh? What are the cost benefits of that, and when does it outweigh? So yeah, I encourage you to have a vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you've heard feedback, and I presume you've heard it before, and we'll be talking later. Is there anything else anybody wants to say, any action anybody wants to take tonight?
You know, I'd like to say just one thing. and it's about process. The selectmen's meeting is a meeting for the selectmen to do the business of the town, as opposed to a public hearing, which is a very different kind of a meeting. This has not been a public hearing, it's been a selectmen's meeting. We never get to talk to each other except at this table because of the open meeting laws. And so when we're conducting a meeting, it's sort of us getting to know how each other feels and what we think we got to do about something that's brought to us. We relish community input, which you've given, and we have every meeting. But this amount of time that we've dedicated to this is somewhat extraordinary. I just want you to know that. It's not normal for us to be having our little meeting and inviting this much time on a topic where we've had plenty of information coming in from public comment. I don't know if you get the distinction. I'm a relatively new selectman. I never realized that the selectmen's meeting was for the selectmen to conduct their business and that an open hearing was a very different kind of a meeting. I never made that distinction until I became the selectman. It took me 6 months to get my mind around that. So I just like to call that out and make sure that you understand that this is very productive, I think. It's taken a lot of time. It's very unusual for a topic to have this amount of dialogue and discussion and input. And I thank you for it, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing it to happen.
Thank you all very much. Okay, so I'm going to move on.
Behind her and behind her.
Energy Task Force, our 7:30 meeting. So I just came from California, so we're actually ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
And you know,
just got in this morning, so.
Brought a lungs full of smoke to the meeting as well.
Brought a few handouts for aiding the discussion this evening.
It's gonna take some Tylenol severe pain. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Because I think. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Shall I get started?
Yes, go ahead and get started.
So, Jonathan DeCock, 130 Oak Knoll Road. The last two meetings that we attended to discuss this, the Board of Selectmen raised a number of concerns, and I wanted to take a moment to address those. And there's one right here for you.
Yeah, I was just making sure your microphone's on.
It's on. Yep. So I'm going to broadly put those concerns into three categories. One is environmental, one is aesthetics, and one is financial. Okay, and so what I did was I went through and thought about how we could really understand the environmental impact of the possibility of solar in town. And so I went to the EPA's website and looked up what they had to say about the carbon equivalents of what we're proposing here. And the EPA's website, they're on the front of the here if you want to actually go see it. But the one that we're recommending, the company that we're recommending in all the places, that's in excess of 2 million kilowatt hours per year that we would be saving by, or we would be producing from the solar arrays. And the equivalent of that is 1,733 tons of CO2. And the way the EPA calculates this is based on, the various plants that they have producing electricity. So it's coal plants, natural gas plants. They average it all up and come up with that. But even that number, I thought, was not a very good representation for how do you feel about this in terms of the environment, right? And so they kindly also convert that number for you to the number of cars. So it's the equivalent of 371 cars per year taken off the roads is the amount of energy that this would produce. It's also the amount of electricity consumed by 260 houses, with your average Carlisle house here. But yes, 260 houses of electricity is the amount of energy that these would produce. And this was a very interesting one. Is every year these solar panels would produce the equivalent in electricity of the carbon as if you were to preserve 14 acres of forest. Okay, and that's based on the size of the trees, the amount of carbon in the ground, versus if you take all those trees out and clear cut it and burn all the trees, right? That's the amount of CO2 that would be released. So every year it's 14 acres of forest that's effectively preserved by the amount of electricity we produce. So that's kind of, there's a number of different ways you can measure environmental impact, but I thought this might help put it in perspective for you guys to see that this is actually something that has a potential for really positive benefits to the environment just by, reducing the global amount of carbon that we're throwing into the atmosphere, okay? And then, moving on, I wanted to talk about the aesthetics for a little bit because I think that's one of the main concerns about this, right? And so, so this is a picture of what they have over at Walden Pond. And one of the things that I noted from this is that it doesn't need to look industrial, right? Walden Pond did a great job with this, and there's two things in particular that I think made this a beautiful canopy. One is they painted it green, right? And so it fits in more naturally with the area around Walden Pond there, the beautiful area there. And the other is they, instead of using a big I-beam to hold it up, they used a nice truss so it feels more airy, right? So I think aesthetically there are things that we can do that would be good there. Then this is actually a picture of the Newton DPW. It's put up by one of the companies that that responded to the RFP. And you can see this is an equivalent, this is a 30-foot high canopy so they can park their big trucks underneath it. And they can actually also be done very nicely, even in an industrial setting, right? So it's quite nice there. And this last picture is also done by the same company and is the landfill in Groton. And you can see the panels are not sticking up very vertically, like the ones in Billerica stick up really, kind of, they're kind of almost an eyesore, and to some people at least, right? But they don't necessarily have to be that way, and the company that puts these in puts in a much lower plane when they do that. So that's the aesthetics. One other thing about the DPW that I wanted to mention that you guys had brought up was the traffic problem there, especially when it gets to peak, right? And we wouldn't want to have poles in the middle causing traffic problems, making it worse. And I think this actually represents a great opportunity for the town to improve the traffic there, right? Because if we come in and we say, okay, we've got, this idea of putting something over top of us, we could potentially keep all the rain and the snow off of us there, which I think would be a benefit to begin with. But above and beyond that, it gives us an opportunity to rethink the traffic flow through there and to have the company that would put this up actually help do that, right? We wouldn't have to fund it ourselves. We could, use the funds that are coming from here to do that. So I think there's the possibility that we could actually have multiple wins on this, right, by improving some aspects while generating nice solar power, while having a nice place to go to the transfer station. So lastly, on the financials, we have heard feedback from a number of town residents and from you guys. Some people think that it's a lot of money. Some people think it's a very little amount of money, right? And one of the companies, the one that we're recommending, is actually offering the town of Carlisle in excess of $4 million for a 20-year period, right? Now, we can debate whether $4 million is a large number or a small number, but if we think about it, right, we just paid $500,000 for 6 acres of field last year, right? And if we used the money coming from this to do that same thing, we could do it every 2.5 years. We could buy another 6 acres of field. Or last year we also approved $3 million for the communications, right, for our fire and whatnot. And if you think about it, right, the money coming from this could pay for that and still be able to buy 2 of those 6-acre parcels, right? Or the school that we put up a few years ago, right? The finances for that, it was about a $15 million school. This would pay for a quarter of it, right? So I think if we look at it in terms of that, we stop thinking about, is that a large amount of money or a small amount of money? Because to me, it's a huge amount of money, but I'm a person, I'm not a town, right? So I think understanding what it is that we could buy with that money, I think is an interesting way to look at it. So that's the 3 aspects that I wanted to bring up based on what you guys had said before. Do you guys have other questions for us? Or, I mean, what we're essentially asking for here in layperson's terms is we think that it's a good idea to select one of these companies so that we can begin negotiations and have each of the town boards really weigh in on what should the conservation, stuff be, what should the school, what does the school have to say about how this should be. The planning board, Peter Gambino has assured me that they're going to make sure we don't put up an eyesore and it's going to be properly screened and the traffic pattern is going to be good. So we'd like to get that company that we select, negotiating with all the town boards, to come up with something that is really good for the town of Carlisle, both from an environmental perspective and from a financial perspective. And so what we're asking for you guys to do tonight, or some future night if you decide not to do it tonight, is to essentially approve going forward to the next step, starting to have the discussions with the board, with the various boards in town, and see if we can actually come up with something good. And I think it would be reasonable for us to come back to you guys after we get all the boards to negotiate and sign off on something to say, this is really what we want to do. Can we actually execute to it? So, what do you think?
So I just have a couple questions. I'll go first. How would we be moving forward in what we would be asking them to do? So I guess a different way of answering it is, what are we committing to when it comes to these designs? There's various aspects of what we could be doing. We could be doing something at DPW where the cars are. We could be doing something in the woods between DPW and the road. We could be doing something over the school parking lot. We could be doing something over where the buses park. We could be doing something between Spalding and the school. And I see those as kind of 5 different potential projects.
Mm-hmm.
Would we be presenting it that way? Or is it kind of like, would we be going into this saying, okay, we're going to negotiate a contract with you to do all of them, and therefore we're committing to all of them, it just is a matter of design?
Well, I think we divide, there's really 4 aspects. We have 4 RFPs, a canopy or a ground mount at each of 2 sites, so that's the 4. So we gave you a memo with a suggested voting, and I think you really need to vote on each of those 4 properties independently to say whether you want to go to the next step, because if you're never going to go with one aspect, well, we should just drop it out right now, and we should only look to negotiate to something that we may do. And I guess the idea, to follow up on Jonathan, would be to come up with the next step, which would include renderings, a detailed layout based on the site information, how many trees, the better idea of exactly what trees would come down, and if there's any additional financial adjustments, that we would have those. We would also have the companies that made certain clarifications on the lease. The lease was developed by town council, so any deviations that they want to take, town council should look at those to say, is this reasonable or not, or this adjustment is okay. So that's really the next step we're asking for, in that when we get those final designs, final renderings, and we've gotten feedback from boards, they would come back to you for
Mm-hmm.
I think what we need now.
The one that you're proposing we select, did they, I saw these here, and I guess, Jen, what you sent me was just as good as it was going to get. It's really hard to see what it is. I mean, I think this is just showing where the overlay district is,
Yeah, that's
right?
just the overlay district.
That's just the overlay
Did they provide anything?
Yes, we have beautiful color pictures.
Similar to what Sunbug proposed, or Yeah,
no, we
their
provided,
proposed.
we got these, you've seen these before, we went, we
I was looking through them. Are they in this?
Yes,
On their
this is what you're.
presentation,
Yeah, no,
you weren't.
that's the one that doesn't really, but it just wasn't in this packet. Okay.
Yeah, what's
yeah,
the-
that's the RFP packet, so that was the information sent to them so that they could produce.
Oh, well,
we
this is
had-
their
We
response.
had better ones. You had given us another
Yeah, we got a whole
proposal
drawings of all the
earlier,
layouts.
yeah, and we lost those.
So,
You want the nice big one?
Yes.
there you go.
It's one location.
And so,
So I don't believe we're committing to the design that's printed out here. I believe what we need to commit to is the locations, and then work with the town boards that, manage the land to say what exactly do we need to do here. Because, for example, the one that you're looking at, it's covering part of the stream. And so there's no way the Conservation Commission is going to allow that exact thing to happen.
That's why we've called it a
So-
negotiation.
Right,
We
it's-
start entering into negotiations on each site, and depending on what
This
sites
is
you
the
guys
back of an
decide.
envelope sketch.
Exactly.
And we refined it.
Exactly.
I
These
just
are
wanted to
concepts,
Get a
that's
better
all.
feeling for is how much is
Yeah.
it just a back of the envelope sketch, and how much of it is we're saying,
Well,
if you can figure it out, you're going to be able to put something between DPW and the road.
Right, well, so,
Right.
from being in this business, I can tell you that the main factors are the size of the system, that drives their financials, but these kind of details of what it looks like and where exactly it's gonna be located, it may affect the financials, but that's not the greatest part of the financials. At the bid stage, they're trying to take it to the next step, because they don't know what we would approve or not approve. So I think that's kind of where it is.
And we're much farther along on the DPW sites than we are at the school.
Right.
Right.
As I understand it, we could move forward with that part of the project while the school
It's developed.
plans are put more in order and we get everybody.
Yes, we have to go back to town meeting and get a bylaw adjustment to do it at the school.
So I think we can, I guess what I'm suggesting is that we move forward on the DPW site, holding off the school site until that's further along developed, and at least get that part of the program underway in terms of negotiations and everything we've got to find out, things that the devil is in the details, but at least I think we could probably do that, and we'd be in pretty good shape, at least, and we'd be one step up on where we are in the block system as well.
Right. I think we also would need a little bit more from you on what we should be pursuing also, because obviously if, as Bob put together a little sequence of motions that maybe we're looking for from you guys. I don't think you got a copy of them yet.
Oh, they have.
Yeah, we got them.
They were here.
And the reason for that is because, our time is precious, and we don't want to be working on something that, this board is not going to support. I just had a discussion with our school committee chair outside, and he was curious, and he couldn't stay till this
I
late.
was wondering where he was.
But, he's supportive of this, and he asked what were the next steps, and I says, well, if the selectmen say okay to the school sites, then the next step that we would take would be is to go to the school board and start educating them on what we've done so far. And then at that same time, we would hope that the selectmen would create another group, which we suggested in our last presentation, maybe and also in these
Right.
motions, to conclude a school committee member, and depending on the site, that group's going to be variance, because the school doesn't have any wetlands in any of the areas, but the DPW site does. So we really want a conscom person on there to help facilitate the the movement of this whole project. So there are several I guess directions that we need from you guys so that we can move forward, and one of them is exactly that, the DPW sites, the one of them or two of them, depending on what your thoughts are and what you've been hearing from the general public.
For the DPW, particularly over the parking area, Gary's been involved in that.
Gary's already been briefed. He saw some sketches of what we sent back to the proposers for our second set of questions that we asked them to provide to us, and he looked at some layouts that
he said were very workable.
Having been there today in the rain,
Yeah.
the traffic issues are the least of our problems.
Right.
All wet. The rain is the biggest.
Well, the rivers are the biggest.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd say about, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, in addition, the Municipal Facilities Committee has been looking at the DPW shed. It needs a new roof, and we've been talking about doing it in such a way that it would then support solar panels as well. And so
That would be
that's
more
another-
of just a town thing, or would that be a part of this?
It could be, you know, it depends on the negotiations and how soon that DPW building gets, you know,
We're trying to get to
sort of
it
strengthened and whatever.
ASAP.
One
Well-
thing before you move a little bit forward, I wanted to clarify something, because you called us up as the Energy Task Force. Even though there's 3 members of the Energy Task Force, this is a work group that was Tim put together
I'm
to
sorry.
evaluate the proposals. And that's one of the reasons why we're asking you to create another group to do the negotiations with whatever contractor we decide on, or you decide.
Right.
I'll just say one more thing about the school. You know, the town meeting is less than 6 months from now, so if it was going to be voted on in town meeting, you'd really have to get a design, getting buy-in, and then actually get a bylaw developed and changed in that time. So I'm not sure it's a good to kick it down the road.
Yeah.
Maybe run into.
Yeah, I mean, we could go and get the bylaw first and then start the process, or we could start the process and get the bylaw.
You hate to do
Well,
what I
right.
have if it's not going to happen at all.
Right,
You don't
right.
want to.
Right, and you would probably want some preliminary sketches of what the contractor thinks is doable at the
Right.
school, not just concepts, but
Right, I
to
think for
present
this-
at town meeting so that people can understand what really would happen to those 2 parcels, to those areas.
The school district decide, the committee, they're going to want to see more details. These are what renderings are going to
The
look
school
like
is
and so
interested
on.
in knowing also, by the way, because they need to do some work on their parking
Parking
lot.
lot, yes,
And
he
they don't want to
mentioned
do
that.
anything if we're going to be doing this.
And they've
frankly,
always-
I've been a little confused as well as to, you know, which is the cart and which is the horse, because we can't be building solar panels on school
Right,
property.
I think
can't
what
we?
they're just, I think what they're just wondering, what you're just wondering is, would we not want you to be talking to the school committee about doing this?
Right. The
We-
school committee's
We
eager,
can't
though.
decide whether or not the school committee is gonna.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
If they
right.
say it-
But
if
we
they
can-
say no
we can
way,
say,
it
you know,
ends-
hey, if
it
the
ends
school
it,
committee
right?
goes along with it, we go along with it.
Well, it still has to go to the town.
And it's, yeah,
still have
but
to
then
go
it's
to
still,
town.
yeah, but if we go to town meeting and the Board of Selectmen is saying, no, we don't think this should be done, then, I think that's what you're looking for, right?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? And then I'm just gonna open up and see.
I just need to weigh in, if I
Mhm.
may. My bias is that I don't like to see trees cut down. That's a bias, it's an emotional bias. It's not scientific. I don't know how many carbon credits we,
No, it's,
I don't understand.
I think reasonable people can disagree on that one, so.
But when I saw that of the 3 companies that proposed, that one of them said flat out, who makes their living by doing solar installations, we don't think it's appropriate to do small-scale solar and cut down trees to do it. I thought, what company, what would, if I were in that business, you know, why would, I would probably never do that. I'd probably say, you want it, you can have it. But this one company said, we don't think it's appropriate. And then I looked at the place that I think is the most sensitive in terms of cutting trees down, because you can do it without asking Mother May I to anybody, is along Lowell Street. You don't have to get anybody's permission to cut all those trees down and install 8-foot off-the-ground solar, right? And so I looked at the responses from the other 2 companies who said, we'll do it. And for that part of it, the one said, you can generate $17,500 a year in revenue by doing that. The other company said you can generate $43,000 a year by doing the same thing. So I thought, well, you know, we're at a stage where these are swags. These are scientific wild guesses, and nobody really knows what it's going to buy, right? I mean, really, do we?
Well, there's significant differences in the 2 proposals that make it so that one proposal actually produces a lot more electricity than the other one.
Because
Mostly a function of the angle of the solar panels. If you angle them too highly, then they shade the ones behind them and you can't get enough of them in there. If you drop them down so that they're not as much of an eyesore, they're actually lower to the ground, you can actually get more energy out of them.
All right, but I think it's fair to say that until you get into negotiating with these folks, you really aren't going to know.
Right.
And the other thing I noted on this, when I looked at the installation costs, the hookup costs, it was very, they were baked into the bottom line numbers that you looked at. But I did some figuring, and if you increase those costs by $10,000, any one of those installation costs by $10,000, it reduced the revenue by $60,000. It had that much of an impact on the bottom line. And in every case, when I looked at every one of these, the impact was the same, a six-fold impact. So if you're if you're not, sort of estimating those installation costs properly, and they range from $10,000 in installation costs for one of the areas to $150,000. So there's another huge range of uncertainty. Anyway, long story short, my thinking also got me to, yeah, I guess it can look okay, and it doesn't have to look as bad as Billerica. But, I drive up and down Wall Street on my way home every day, and I look into the woods with all the leaves gone, and I look at the streams and the rocks and the contours of the property, and I think, if I lived in Rocky Point, and I had to drive out my driveway every morning and look at an array of solar panels, I'd wonder, is it me? Am I the only one bothered by that? Or if I try to sell my house, is somebody else going to be bothered with that and want to pay me less money because they have to look at that every day? And so I went to our assessor and I said, collectively, the 8 homes at Rocky Hill, how much in taxes do they pay? It's almost $100,000.
Yes, it is.
Now, if they were impacted by 10% by that, we'd lose, if we got, as in one estimate says, for cutting down those trees, we get 17.5, we'd lose 10 of it. We'd be down $7,500. I'll write you a check to make the difference if you don't cut the trees down. I mean, I think that we really need to think about the impact on the community. You know how much we love our trees. You know how much we love our vistas. And I think if you do go, and I don't know how these guys we're all going to vote. If you go to Amorisco and start negotiating, we might find that we're so far from where we thought we'd be on installation costs and generation revenues that, we might have to back off and say, let's go to Plan B. And instead of Plan B being this third company who you thought didn't have a whole lot of experience, maybe we ought to go to the company that said, we don't think it's appropriate to cut down trees, and we're in that business. And by the way, have you thought about putting a canopy at Spalding Field where everybody watching their kids play soccer would benefit from being in the shade? It's not even on anybody's plan. So they gave this some thought that seemed to be tuned into Carlisle. So I would hope that if we couldn't come to terms with Amorisco, that Plan B would be, let's take a look at Sunbug, because they seem to be so much better attuned to what we are all about in Carlisle. So that would sort of be my recommendation. I'm not going to vote in favor of going ahead with Amorisco because I just don't think we ought to be cutting trees down.
So there's
there's
a few things that you can decide here, right? One is the location, and the other is the company, and you can decide 2 different companies for the 2 different sites if you want to. We can't decide 2 different companies at the same site; that would cause trouble. But 2 different companies at the 2 different sites is okay, and you can decide canopy or ground mount at each one. So, or both.
I think canopy, from what I've seen of canopy at Walden Pond, I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense. But anyway, so that's Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you.
But,
Kate?
Well, I guess I was going to say what John was saying. One of the saving graces of this is that you seem to have broken it up so that we're not stuck,
Right. It's not an all or nothing.
with all or nothing.
Yep.
And that we could always say, negotiations break down with the tree part, we could still do the canopy. And it's not, so
I
that
mean, you can start with both and get, we broke out the financials for doing half the job, and specifically, we went back to them and said, what if the interconnection costs change? What if the incentives change? So we tried to get matrices so we can actually, so people can't, the vendor can't later on say, hey, I didn't have that covered. So we did try to get that, but you can say yes canopy, yes ground mount, and then decide, oh, well, I don't like the ground mount, but you don't have to go one way or the other now and then come back later. So I think that's
authorize
how we're.
negotiation on the ground mount, but then not follow through with it.
Right.
Exactly.
The only thing we can't decide is to pick Sunbug for the transfer station because they didn't submit an offer for that one. So.
And the other thing I want to say is over the years, so we've gotten Energy Task, we've got a number of inquiries about the overlay district over the last 3-4 years. Various companies occasionally come in and say they want to do this or that, and they give, they might put a proposal, they said we liked, and we definitely never felt it right that you would just go with a company that came off the street and said, here's a proposal, let's do this. So, this was a way to take this land, which is approved for this function, and actually go out and get an open bid and RFPs and do a detailed job of it so we can kind of
Well, you're
put it to
doing
bed.
You've done what you've been tasked to do.
Put it for bed once and all versus having
Yes.
people,
That's-
having companies come in, and we're at a good timing in terms of, we're at the beginning of an incentive program instead of the end of an incentive program. So that's kind of the idea.
I'm glad you mentioned the incentive program, because I looked at Block 3 versus Block 4.
Yeah, there's a
also.
big difference, yeah.
Big difference, but what's even more interesting is that the differences
Differences are
range
different.
from 10% to 18%.
Yeah.
Right, they are, yeah, it is.
Well,
That's the
pretty
state.
well known what the difference is going from Block 3 to Block 4 in terms of the 4% incentive. So why is there such a wide range?
So if I could speak to why there's a difference and you had mentioned this before, Carrie, why there's like a multiple of differences. And one of the reasons is there's a certain amount of after-tax cash flow per year that the investor would say the project produces overall. But the investor is going to take whatever their specified number is. So if you have $100,000 of overall benefit, well, the investor might be taking $85,000 of that, and $15,000 goes to the town. So another company might have they get $110,000 or $115,000. So their difference is not that much.
Okay, I got you.
But they have double the return to the town because they might have a different rate of return in a larger
Right.
system. So
Yeah, if
it's-
they can get more energy out of it, then they get more money.
So it's
then-
kind of misleading, the
So-
multiple, because we're only getting kind of the tip of the iceberg, not the entire cash flow.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to, I'm assuming you are,
Hi,
want to
good
talk about
evening.
this. Yeah.
My name's Laura Ballestero, and I live in Carlisle. I also sell houses in Carlisle. And I'm here to tell you that any time I've sold a house that had a solar system on the ground, it has devalued the property. So please be cautious when you decide to put this in a residential area, because the homes that are abutting this property will definitely be negatively impacted. I can tell you that I'm all for solar power, but even homes that have solar systems on their roofs, buyers are so turned off if they can see it by the street. It's fine if they can see it if they don't see it from behind. Even if they can see it on a neighbor's house, it's aesthetically very much a turnoff to buyers. So I do feel that if you are going to pursue this in any neighborhood that have homes, those sellers or those owners will definitely be negatively impacted. So please, when you think about it, have mercy on those people.
Thank you.
Hi, Eva O'Keefe, Rocky Point. Thank you very much for speaking so eloquently to our concern. It is not the solar power that we are against, but it is the fact that, not only does Elizabeth Ridge Road, right, have the access to the transfer station, they have the sand pile, they have all the junk that goes through that, they have the traffic, and now, right, we're going to take down the trees that block that so that they can have the, unsightly solars. So what we would like is really for the town to purchase. I walk a lot of the land in Carlisle. I have for the 20 years that I have been here. And there are lots of pieces of property where I walk through woods and then I have this wonderful field in front of me, right? We buy that. We buy all of that. And I don't understand, I have never understood why we can't develop something that requires no trees to be taken down, that abuts no property, right, no homeowner's property, and use that for town-developed solar. I think that would be very good use of the taxes that we pay. And the aesthetics, I think that would be wonderful for the town. So I just want to state that. But, we vehemently oppose the solar overlay at the transfer station because we already take a hit. I think, the real feeling is in the neighborhood is that, geez, all of that condensed activity, right, is within a very short range. You've got all of the municipalities, you have all of the transfer stations, you have all of the school, and if you go out a little bit, you have none of that. Right? So I think we should kind of create a balance. Thank you.
Could I answer a little bit that?
Let's get through all of them
oh,
and
sure,
then we'll come back. Yeah.
I'm George Payne. I live at Benfield Farms. And my question has more to do with the financials. I'm neither plus or minus on solar for me. Is that I know with cars, they've been reducing the amount of subsidies from the state government. And I know eventually all subsidies will be reduced. Now, how much, I don't know if subsidies are having any part of the financial equation for solar farms. And if subsidies suddenly go away, how much that will affect the amount of money that the town would get, the profitability, and therefore how much the town would get out of that. I'm not looking for numbers, just are they affected by subsidies?
Yeah, there's a 30% federal tax credit on all solar projects that the investor would take advantage of. There's a new mass incentive program, but the incentive is locked in when you get qualified for the program. The incentive is paid by the utility for 20 years. It's a fixed payment from the utility. So once the project is approved, that payment is guaranteed.
I'm talking about the government's subsidies, not the utilities, just the, like when you buy a car. I know a good friend of mine just bought a new car and was considering, a hybrid, and they decided not to because the subsidies are now so low.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is the incentives are locked in when the project starts, so the tax credit and there's accelerated depreciation, so those are all determined when they.
Just curious.
No,
it's a very good question, actually.
It is a good question.
So if it changes, it changes for future projects, not for the
right,
project.
Right.
Exactly.
These numbers are based
we're leasing
on
the land and it
now.
just keeps getting paid,
And
no matter what.
the town would be entering into is a lease for a 20-year lease, so that's a fixed price. It doesn't matter what happens.
The town plus
It's,
benefits.
yes, the
from-
towns,
yeah.
yes, it doesn't matter what the incentives change because the contract is signed for a lease for 20 years based on these numbers or whatever we did negotiate.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yes, and then I'll come back.
I'm Drew Kissinger. I live on Curve Street. I'm a mechanical engineer. I studied solar engineering in school. I have solar panels in my house. There are two ways as a homeowner you can install solar panels in your house. One is you take out a mortgage, or if you're super rich, you can just pay for it outright. All of the benefits, all the financial benefits accrue to you, to me as the homeowner, right? I get all of my meter spins backwards. I get all that money. I get the state, the tax incentives. All that comes to me. The other way you can do it is you can hire one of these companies that comes in and installs solar panels on your roof, and they own it all. And the reason they do it is not because they're a charity. It's because they make a ton of money doing that because they get all the money. Carlisle has an excellent credit rating, we spend a lot of money on things that are just complete liabilities, like schools, in the sense that in the accountant sense of it, right? They don't generate any revenue at all. Solar panels are worth a lot of money. That power, it's, what was it, 25 megawatts? What's the street value of 25 megawatts? And there's no reason, I guarantee you, there is absolutely no reason why Carlisle should finance a project like, or shouldn't finance it. We should finance a project like this and get all of the economic benefit. We should not go with a company that is going to take, you described it as an iceberg, and they're taking the lion's share of the economic benefit, and we get the tippity top. That makes absolutely no sense. We have an excellent credit rating. We can get anybody to do this job. It's not even new or exciting. We've been doing this kind of solar installation for 30 plus years. And right now, it makes so much sense. It's actually cost effective to do it. You hire a structural engineer and you get someone to install prefabbed solar canopies over parking lots, and you take all of the money. I know we're looking for sources of revenue in town. This should be a source of revenue, period. If you don't make the max amount of money out of this job, you are completely missing the boat. That's my perspective.
So you're not against the solar, you are saying we should own it, not lease it?
Absolutely. We can finance this and we can make all the money. You know, if they make it really easy to do the job. Oh, you just sign on the line. We'll do everything else, and we'll give you a check. But that check is like 10% of what they make. It makes no sense. You know, we can finance any of this stuff and do it all ourselves, or have somebody, pay somebody to do the design and install, but not take any of the add-on revenue. It makes no sense.
All right,
well, it's a great comment. That's really where we started on this project.
Where we wanted to go.
And we did the estimates, and this makes more money because of the tax benefits to investors.
The town doesn't get any of those
Town has
incentives.
no tax benefits, so we're paying cash. The other thing is if the town financed this system, it's a higher interest rate than it would be, say, a school. So it's I don't know all those details, but we got quotes on financing from Treasurer in terms of what they could get for a 20-year bond to pay for it, and it really didn't. We presented these numbers. We presented these numbers 6 or 9 months ago before we started.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
the Selectmen.
totally ignorant.
No, that's fine.
Selectmen.
No,
It
and
just
the
goes on
Selectmen,
long runs, but-
after discussion, really decided it'd be better to lease. There was no liability. We wouldn't have to maintain the system, and the numbers were better than the town could do it itself. Because really, that's kind of where we started. We wanted to own the system.
Okay, just one more comment and I'll go home. And I'm sorry you guys are here later because I'm talking, but is there a way to make a public corporation that would get the tax benefits? I mean, are there other things you can do? I don't like to have interest. Question.
I don't know.
That's
Good
a
night.
good
Thank
question.
So, before I go to you, why don't you go ahead and everybody else has been responding. So,
I just wanted to respond on the issue of other pieces of land. The Energy Task Force, and especially Bob Clark, looked at every single piece of land the town of Carlisle owns. Almost all of it is under conservation restriction and cannot be used for solar power. The two possible places in town were the school and the solar overlay district, which has already been designated.
Yeah, I'd like to add some more to that, Helen, too, is that
Yes.
in order to put a solar system in of this size, you need three-phase power, and you need it close if you're going to make it beneficial and more economically feasible. And that's another issue, because to bring in three-phase power to that area, there's a lot of private lands that have open acres and fields, but to get three-phase power close to it to make it feasible is very expensive, and that's kind of the weighing factor too.
okay, thanks. Yes.
Hi, I'm Lee Tappan. I live on Fisk Street. Been here about 18 years. And I have nothing technical to add. I just wanted to weigh in since I've been sitting here all night with you all. And thank you for your service and thank you for looking into this. I like it when things that we build are structurally useful, as not just the solar energy. So I like the canopies. I like the idea of shade structures that can produce power. I really don't like the ground. I just don't like taking a field and not even cutting down trees, but even if it's a field, I don't like to see it's like tech litter to me. But that's just my opinion, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else?
So one other thing.
So the transfer station, is the stuff picked up by weight or by volume?
Are you talking about the trash?
Yeah.
Tipping is by ton.
Because if you cover it and it takes out the water weight, have you thought about the cost savings you might have there if it's by weight? Because it makes a big difference.
We hadn't thought of that. Thank you.
Okay. Unintended consequence.
We're more on solar instead of trash.
Who'd have thunk?
Okay, so.
I'm sure they account for the water.
What's that?
I'm sorry, you asked, I waved you off. May I make just one comment?
Oh, yeah, sure. Come on up.
Why not?
I hate being the new guy who shows up at the last minute. Thank you all for the work you're doing and for allowing public comment on this one.
Can you just state your name
I'm
and your
sorry,
address?
Eric Zimmerman, 168 Sunset Road. I'm unabashedly pro-solar. I have a 48-panel installation on my roof, a zero-energy house. I'm with you in heart and spirit all the way. I feel like the first project that we do here has to be unabashedly beautiful because we're going to need the townspeople's support to do so much more of this. And so I would hope that at the transfer station we spend a lot of energy thinking about what design will look like so that we create something that we can show off as opposed to something that we want to hide. And I would, you know, as a base point, contemplate doing just the canopy and not mowing down all the trees, because I think the degree of feedback that you'll get from that will be extraordinary, and it'll be very, very hard to make that look as beautiful as you might make a canopy look. So thank you all. I'll stop there because
No, good point.
a meeting, not a hearing. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I think that's it for public input.
Oh, boy.
So we have a lot to think about here. I guess, you know, I guess we'll just kind of, Carrie already kind of spoke in your thoughts about it. Is you want to add anything more after your son's?
Yeah. I don't know, does it violate the open meeting law if you talk to your son about these things?
What about, you know, I mean, he threw in there something that we were kind of all quiet about. I mean, yeah, I don't mean we didn't want to talk about it. We didn't know the answer. Does it make sense to look into that, or?
They did look into it.
No, public corporation.
Public
corporation.
Yeah.
Right.
I have no idea what he was talking about.
Energy Trust Fund.
Energy Trust.
Don't you only then still get the tax benefit if you have to pay taxes?
Right. Yeah, probably.
So it would have to be something that we were actually generating income on in order to get the tax benefit.
It would have to be a private tax-paying entity.
And also you'd have to raise the funds to build the unit.
So we'd have to come up with a business that actually made money, and we're not good at that.
Yeah.
Is Concord's electricity, is that the same,
No, they're electric plants,
No.
no.
Electric plant?
No.
Also, just one more statement about that sort of, because we had to make a decision, because per town council, originally, we wanted to actually solicit both an ownership model and a
They
lease
wouldn't let
model.
us.
Mhm.
And the
I
problem
remember
is,
that
if you go an ownership model, it's essentially you have to build it if you get the bid. And so it didn't allow us to go one way or the other. So we had to really progress. And I think the selectmen were pretty clear that they prefer the lease model. And the numbers are better.
I prefer the one with the biggest return.
Yeah, the numbers
Yeah.
are definitely better.
Whether it's leased or not.
I have to say, I'm probably leaning Carrie's way. in not wanting to cut down trees for this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
leave it at that.
I mean, I think we can move forward with the things we agree on.
Yeah.
So we can get started on this. And part of that, I mean, the negotiating part is gonna take some time, and we're gonna have to get started if we're gonna ever finish it. And we can, we can say, let's go with the canopies,
Yeah.
and start with that, and we'll see how things go from there.
Okay. I mean, I think I've stated my opinion before. I'm not. I would require me quite a bit more reassuring to think that between Spalding and the school is a good idea, and between the 225 and the DPW is a good idea. I think I don't like to cut down trees, but to me it's even more about the people who have to look at it every
Yeah,
single
the
day,
aesthetic.
and we're making decisions that are impacting them.
I'm not worried about cutting down the tree. I mean, every time we build a house, we cut down more
Yeah.
trees than we're talking about here.
And trees can go back, but I think solar panels are just going to be there for 20 years, we hope. So I'm not saying I would never think that was a good idea, but I kind of really agree with what you said. Was it Eric?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's make sure that everybody loves what we do, so that when we do go back for another one, they say, yes, they know how to do it, and they know how to do it well. I am super in favor of the canopy at the school. I think that's perfect. Of course, I don't get to decide that; they do.
Yeah.
But I think that's, if it works for them and it doesn't. I'm a little worried about the one up by the buses, just because it's kind of tight up there, and I don't want to disrupt the bus flow. Never mind, it's town meeting parking, but I think that bus flow, I wouldn't, but certainly down where the cars are, I'm 100% in favor of that. And if there's a way to make it work for DPW that Gary's happy with, I don't want Gary not, I don't want it to work for the residents, and I don't want it to not work for Gary.
Yeah, Gary gets his field
And,
paved.
so I would be in favor of somehow moving forward with those two in a way that we're not just saying, yes, go do it no matter what it looks like,
Yeah.
right? That we still control that, and then we can go back to them. But then then there's Carrie's issue about which vendor, because you were saying that you weren't gonna support the vendor.
Well, my only, in that regard, in terms of the recommendations that you have, which I think are very sound, on the third recommendation, if negotiations with Amoresco do not progress satisfactorily, you said enter into discussions with Verigy. And I would say reevaluate where you are and consider Sunbug, because I believe they did come back and say, we'll give you a canopy proposal for the DPW as well. I saw an addendum to their original, right, so they would do that.
Yep. So they're out for tree cutting, but not for canopies.
Correct.
At both
Yeah.
sites.
So I think all we're asking for now is, if you went for Amoresco, we would come back to you. We wouldn't go, we simplified it, so we're just asking for one company to start. We would come back if that didn't work out.
Sunbug either met or exceeded every one of your your qualifications.
Except
and
the age of the
Verizon
company.
Their age of
didn't,
the
so,
company.
yeah,
But-
Do
yeah.
we know who did the welding?
I don't.
I just want to point out to Nathan, something like this would not interfere with the buses, because these are interior, whereas here, you would imagine they have to go around.
I
them,
agree,
so-
doing something at the school without interfering with the buses is doable.
Yeah,
It's just
it's doable.
engineering and it's just
Yeah,
structural
I'm just
steel.
saying, this wouldn't interfere, this
the
I
other
could
thing
see could.
I will say about
Right.
that, so I walked that site, the posts are like 80 feet by 40-foot spacing, so it's not.
Plenty of room.
You went to this one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I
but
mean, it's-
I'm just saying, if you don't have to turn around the post because it's in the corner, it's a little bit like
Right.
table legs
Yeah, but I mean,
at
that's-
Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
When I was- Carry the,
I think we're all done with public input.
okay.
No, not you. You're on me. I was responding.
Yeah. Gary, one comment I make on your, request to evaluate Amoresco versus Sunbug versus Verigy is you're really not talking to this group. You need to make that clear to the group that you make to do the negotiations.
Right.
Because we're not, would hope Bob would be part of one of those persons from the Energy Task Force, but you got a whole bunch of different people.
Right.
I mean, we're not just creating a group of you.
We're not.
You can put us on it if you want to, but
Yeah, so we're looking at different
Yeah, in a
aspects
way,
of
when
the
we
town to be involved in this next
Yeah,
phase.
you already
so we
know
can
all
get
this
different-
stuff.
Get the different viewpoints.
You
Right.
have the learning curve.
Okay, so I think,
You're dying to be on it, right?
all right, so let's go to number 2, and let's go ahead and well, is there a general thought that we would go forward with canopies?
Yes.
Do we need
And
a-
that,
Do we need a motion?
well, I just want to get the general
Oh,
feel
yes.
first, and that we're fine with Amoresco. I
Yes.
think to pronounce that,
To
to
start,
start,
yeah.
and I would agree with you, I would go to
I mean, they
Sunbug
had
as the next
financially
one.
the most advantageous proposal.
Okay, and then, so we'll get back and vote, but, so there's 2 of those in number 1, and then, for number 2, which for everybody is the makeup of the working group. So this would be creating a new group that would be school committee, BOS, energy, town council, FinCom. Can town council be on a board, or are they just somebody that we reference?
They'd be more advisory.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they can actually sit on a committee.
Right.
And so you had 7 here, that's the number you were looking for?
Not necessarily, we were just
Okay.
putting out potential people who would help. Who would help.
Move it forward, yeah.
If there's not any ground mount, only canopy, probably Conscom would not need to be
Beyond
involved.
pods, right.
Okay. All right, so we're talking school committee, FinCom.
That's
I would put in there, well, I don't know. I was gonna say, facilities, but it doesn't really, I guess I would do facilities just because it might impact flow and things, but I don't know. And maybe there's
And
something on the
facilities could be
building.
helpful
Yeah.
on it, I think.
Well,
Okay,
there's
so
other
we
members at
have
the discretion.
Board of Selectmen,
Yeah, well,
facilities.
that's the other member at description, the BOS would be the facilities then, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what's that?
The final
The
one.
facilities.
Yeah, well, I've been crossing them out left and right here. So we would have somebody from the BOS, somebody from the facilities, somebody from FinCom, somebody from the school committee, which leaves 3 of you.
Actually, we don't need
Well, Tim.
conservation.
Tim's not on this list.
Well, Tim
Well,
would be the,
we're
Tim is
saying
the.
Tim would be in charge of the
Okay.
as a project,
Okay,
as
so
a
then-
contract.
Because you're directing me to form this work.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so then Tim, and then 2 of you. Then we have 7.
I'd recommend
I'm
strongly,
thinking-
I'm gonna recommend Bob be part of it, because he's developed our school solar
he's the technical
system.
expert.
He's our technical, yeah, we need. And what, are you looking for somebody else?
Why do you,
John?
Do you want to volunteer, or shall I?
Doesn't have to be 7.
Good, Tom? Yeah.
I'll volunteer,
There you go,
Okay.
Jonathan, good.
All right.
unless you really want it.
So Bob,
No, no.
okay, and then I guess we have to put something out to ask the other ones. You would do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there a motion to, I'm gonna start with what's number 3 here, the town? So what do you mean we're selecting, so we have to do that in order for you to do number 1, the?
Well, I kind of viewed it
negotiations?
as, well, A, deciding what properties formally.
Uh-huh.
B, deciding to form a work group to
Yeah.
negotiate, and 3,
Who do you start
selecting a
with?
vendor to start negotiating with.
Let me,
Okay.
let me start with a...
Vendors.
More vague and say that in
Vendors.
2, that the town administrator is directed to form the working group, which then would do this? Why do we need to specify Amoresco?
But because
don't.
we have to select the vendor. That's our responsibility.
Okay, all right.
As I understand it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
We can't.
Yeah, and that's.
Yeah, we have
All
to
right.
do that one.
Okay, so just leave it, and then we leave it as it is.
All right, so.
For each of the two projects.
So we're talking about B and D.
B and D, yes.
B and D.
So is there a motion to proceed, for the town of Carlisle to proceed with the negotiation of a lease and pilot agreement with qualified developer who has responded to RFP 18-1 at each of 2 locations? B, the solar photovoltaic facility overlay district, a canopy mount solar photovoltaic system, and D, at the parking lots near the Carlisle schools, a canopy mount solar photovoltaic.
I so move.
system. I would say, if I could just amend this, the parking lots at the school.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
I think
it-
street.
I think you
At
should
or
keep
near
it
the school.
Near.
Leave it near.
Because Spalding may be included.
Spalding may be included on the negotiations. There was a reason. why
down along the parking down there?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, if it can be
Oh,
protected
okay.
from
All right.
fly balls and things like
Okay.
that.
That's
Second.
fine.
It's the same lot, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so you firsted it? Firsted it? Is
I
that a
firsted,
word?
I firsted it, yes.
I seconded
And you
it.
seconded it? All right, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? Okay, and then,
You better do this one because I lost.
okay, the Board of Selectmen to direct for the town administrator is directed to form a working group within membership as designated by the Board of Selectmen to negotiate a lease and pilot for the approved projects. The working group will return to the Board of Selectmen for final approval with the final photovoltaic system layout, site renderings, updated financial projects, and feedback from town boards. For both approved locations, I don't know what SWG is,
Solar working
the
group.
solar working group suggests the following members for the working group: Board of Selectmen member, a facilities committee member, a FinCom member, a school committee member, Tim himself, and Bob and Jonathan.
So move.
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. And then the town of Carlisle selects Amoresco as the solar developer. RFP 18-1 responded to negotiate with the solar photovoltaic facility overlay to negotiate for the photovoltaic project as approved in number 1, and for the as approved for number 1, and for the Carlisle School if their project is approved for number 1.
So move.
And this binds us how, Tim?
Merely selects the vendor.
You selected a preferred vendor to negotiate
Right.
with. If at any point, breaks down, you can go.
We'll be
through
back.
the two.
Yeah, so it's an
Yeah,
RFP,
and
so
I-
there's
and I-
no,
so I would
there is no
add-
requirement
Okay.
to select,
All right.
to
You're not
enter
bound
into a
to them.
contract.
You're bound to negotiate in good faith, but if you can't reach agreement. you can-
Okay, great, all right. So that was the motion.
Okay. I'll make that motion. So moved.
Second?
Okay, any further discussion? You seem hesitant.
Yeah, well, I'm just, was wondering if I guess we discussed that. Fine.
You were wondering if we have them do it.
Yeah.
I think that we've already had
Yeah.
a committee do it, we just need to trust
Okay,
them.
all right.
Okay, so it's first and second, no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys. I never see you anymore.
Sorry, we made you even
Oh,
later.
yes, we will. Oh, yes, we will.
Okay.
Nathan?
Yes.
Just for clarification, you're talking about a working group to undertake this negotiation process?
Yes,
Or is this-
we're asking Tim to put the working group together, and we suggested membership.
Okay, so they will undertake the negotiation.
Yes,
Something of a time.
and the final planning and all that.
There doesn't have to be any property.
That's my understanding.
Right.
Yeah.
Whatever comes back, the board has to-
The board has to
Right.
approve. Okay, so we're going to move on if you, excuse me, we're going to move on if you could step out. Helen, I'm sorry if you wouldn't mind just stepping out. Sorry to call you out.
I asked the question, it's my fault. Yeah, but Helen's was the name that we could come up with.
Thanks for putting it out. My mic isn't on, I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now at 8 o'clock.
Yes. Yeah, well.
Okay, I just want to point out that even Bob left us. Yes, I noticed that you're here, but.
Supposed to leave at 8.
We wore him out. We don't want to have a replacement.
Well, both Nathan and I are in California time, so it doesn't bother us any.
Except I have not slept since yesterday morning.
Yes, that's okay.
Okay, so the topic now is another meaty one. It's going to be a long night. So this is the discussion about housing authority appointments, which we need to do, and that kind of brings about a discussion about the roles of the housing authority and the housing trust, and kind of what roles and responsibilities are going forward. So first, I just want to start with what was in your packet. I think was the final version, but was a letter, I guess, a letter from Tom Harrington, our town council, about the difference between the housing authority and the housing trust and what their roles are. And I think that, assume you all read it, but I think it kind of boils down to that last paragraph, I think. Well, obviously, because it's a summary paragraph. Sorry, I'm tired. But basically where he says that, broadly there appears to be nothing the authority previously did that Carlisle cannot in Carlisle that cannot be done by the trust. And I think that the real bottom line there is that what really distinguishes the housing authority is they're responsible for managing town-owned units, and we don't currently have any town-owned units. And so having read this and thought about this quite a bit, I wanted to make a proposal, and I'm just going to read it so that I don't mess up. I am going to read it, but don't look at this for its grammar or its form. They're truly just notes.
I'm not supposed to correct the apostrophes?
Yeah, no.
That's fine.
Please don't, and I don't have one for you yet. Oh no, I do. So what I'd like to do tonight is to propose a strategy for how we approach the Carlisle Housing Authority, the appointments to that group, and the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust going forward. Again, this is just my proposal. I'm not speaking for the board. So as everyone's aware, the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust, and kind of by extension the Carlisle Board of Selectmen, and the Carlisle Housing Authority have been struggling to work collaboratively together towards providing affordable housing solutions in Carlisle for many years. It's my belief that when you have two groups with similar responsibilities, conflict is likely, and certainly inefficiencies are certain. I've been on the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust for 4.5 years, and I know that the group strongly has desired to work collaboratively with everybody. We really look forward this summer to engaging in a dialogue and how we could improve our relationship going forward. But the conflict that we've had just kind of brought progress to a standstill. With the last project that the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust proposed, and it was long before I think any of us were on it, so we don't take credit for it, but was the golf property, which was completed in 2015. So as I stated at the last town meeting, the Board of Selectmen and the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust really strongly desired to attend mediation sessions with the Housing Authority with the goal of improving that working relationship. But unfortunately, the entire Housing Authority decided to resign because town meeting didn't support the request for a housing coordinator role. So with that as a background, I think that it's extremely unfortunate that they decided to do that. But it also, I think, presents a unique opportunity for us to think outside the box for how we address affordable housing issues in Carlisle. What I'm going to propose is just one option. I'm not saying this is, must do this, but I believe that it's an appropriate course of action. So as I already mentioned, to have good background information, I asked Town Council to look closely at the roles of both the Housing Authority and the Housing Trust, because I wanted it clearly outlined where the responsibilities overlapped and where they were unique to one group, because there was always a lot of discussion about that. In his report, which you all have, he states that the groups have the same responsibilities with one exception. The Housing Authority is responsible for managing town-owned affordable units. We don't have any. So because of the significant overlap in responsibilities and the lack of town-owned affordable housing units, I propose that we combine the Affordable Housing Trust and the Housing Authority into one group. And that we do this by, one, moving the existing Housing Authority responsibilities to the Housing Trust. That's the 2 leases that we have. 2, the Housing Authority is officially dissolved. And 3, we increase the size and the makeup of the trust to make up for the loss of some resources who are looking into this. So I would propose that step 1, and just to go into more detail, we appoint members to the Housing Authority who would be open to evaluating this proposal and other proposals, but as a possible course of action. If they find it would be appropriate, they would transfer ownership of the 2 leases the Housing Authority currently manages to the trust. They would declare that the Housing Authority is no longer needed and vote to disband. At the Springtown meeting, they would request the town to vote to disband the Housing Authority. And then if that is successful, they would send the vote to the state for approval. Step 2 of what I'm proposing would be that, to offset the loss of the Housing Authority by adding resources to the Housing Trust and adjusting the Housing Trust membership mix to eliminate the majority influence of the Board of Selectmen. So towards that end, I would propose that if the Housing Authority is disbanded, we would change the trust membership from 7 to 9 with 3-year terms. And we would change the makeup of the trust to be 4 Board of Selectmen to eliminate the majority of the board. And I would say that, due to the perceived influence of the chair, it would be the chair who would not serve on the Housing Trust. That's just my proposal. That we would then add 1 planning board member, 1 resident from one of the current affordable housing facilities, just, making sure we have 1 person, even though we don't own them, and 3 citizens at large with an interest in affordable housing. So it would be 4 Board of Selectmen and 5 non-Board of Selectmen members. And then step 3, once the leases are transferred, but before new projects are considered, I believe that a review of the Benfield project is in order. So I think it's critical that we learn what went well and what didn't, so that we can make future projects even better than projects we've already done. I think that the scope would be a joint effort of the Trust and the Board of Selectmen. And I also think that even if the Housing Authority does not vote to disband, I think we need to do this review, and that we should request that the Housing Authority does such a review of Benfield.
I like the rest of that sentence, though.
Okay.
Keep on reading.
Okay, I'll read it. Okay, if the CHA is not disbanded, I believe that the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust and the Board of Selectmen should request the new Housing Authority to conduct such a review as a requirement to the funding of any new projects. The scope of the review to be worked out jointly between the Housing Authority, Housing Trust, and the BOS. So what I'm saying there is, we're going to request them to do that, but we're not going to fund any more projects unless it gets done. Step 4, work with the Master Planning Committee to determine a mechanism to really formalize the inclusion of housing needs as part of the master plan. I know they're doing it, but you know, in concert with that request, request that the Housing Trust, I'm sorry, let me just read it word for word here. Work with the Master Planning Committee to determine a mechanism to formalize the inclusion of the housing needs as part of the master plan, and in concert with that, request that the Housing Trust create a plan based on priorities identified in the master plan. So in summary, I don't believe that Carlisle needs both a housing authority and a housing trust. Therefore, I think that we should absorb the functions of the authority into the trust, increase the size of the trust, and change its makeup to ensure that they are actively engaged in the planning process. To me, this represents a much more efficient use of Carlisle's volunteer efforts and at no cost to the affordable housing efforts in Carlisle. If the rest of the board is in agreement, I would propose that we create a subcommittee to flesh this out further, because it's just my thoughts. And I'm sure you all have ways that you want to alter it.
I move we create a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen to review the recommendations of the chair and come back with further recommendations.
What would this committee be?
I just was wondering if it should just be
composed
a subcommittee of only the selectmen?
Well, no. So thinking that this might happen, you may recall in the last Affordable Housing Trust, you know, we did discuss the possibility of a working group to figure out appointments and how we deal with this going forward.
Yeah.
Wanting it's kind of really, really weird because so many of us on the Board of Selectmen are the trust, and there aren't currently any members who are on the trust who aren't on the Board of Selectmen. But in his role as trust, Kerry agreed, and the trust voted that if we were to create this committee, he would be the trust liaison, I guess, or trust appointee. But what, you know, I think who else might we want to have on it?
Okay.
So we have trust? Or is it just the Housing Trust and the Board of Selectmen?
Me, myself, and I.
Right, exactly. I'll appoint you and you appoint me.
Well, I'm wondering if we are putting the cart before the horse here, you know, before we have, do we want to talk about whether we want to do, you know, step 1, 2, and 3 first?
Well,
Because
I'm not sure are these sequential?
Well, yeah, if 1 doesn't happen, then 2 doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that the
I mean, what do we?
But my summary kind of jumped all the way back up to the beginning, where I think that we need a subgroup to kind of flush this out so that it's not just a Nathan Brown thing. So I would recommend that it be somebody from the trust, somebody from the Board of Selectmen, and a citizen at large who has an interest in housing. I don't think it needs to be more than 3 people, right? We're not.
Okay.
And specifically, the work product would be?
Specifically, the work product would be
A recommendation.
A recommendation and for who we should appoint, and a path and a potential path forward if who is appointed chooses to go that path.
Yeah.
Right. Once, you know, I mean, they're appointed, they can do what they want. So I'll let you guys all mull it over.
I'm not sure I understand.
It didn't occur to me until just now, Nathan, but the Housing Authority were all elected positions. And so the control of the housing authority was by a group that were elected specifically for that purpose. We're saying that the purpose of the housing trust is fundamentally the same as that purpose, because we don't have those town-owned facilities to manage. So it's the same purpose, but we are no longer giving the town the ability to have control of that body voted, as voted positions, if we go back to 4 selectmen rather than 5. I don't know, I mean, I don't know if that's significant, but it certainly was significant that the housing authority was were all voted into their positions. I don't, what
So
we
it's-
give up by not having control of folks that were voted into their positions by the town, we give up that
So
control.
you're wondering whether or not the Board of Selectmen should maintain control?
5. Yeah,
All
maintain
5.
control, basically, yeah, maintain control. Yeah.
Because we're elected.
Because we're elected. I'm not a control freak, as I think you know, but it was done for, it's there for a purpose.
So I think that
Just saying.
the housing authority's primary responsibility, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, is they're elected and their primary responsibility is hiring somebody who, a director, an executive director of the housing authority, right?
Which at some point we
Might need again.
might need to be able to do. One
Yeah.
might be
Yeah.
able to do
At some point,
that.
we may say, let's create a housing authority. I just don't see that on anywhere near.
Or have town-owned housing.
Right.
And we had town-owned housing before we had a housing authority.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't necessary to have village court for those 5 years that village court was there without a housing authority.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the only question. The other question is, part of the master planning process should be an update of the housing production plan specifically, rather than just a plan. I think
Mhm.
it's due to be updated.
Yeah, I brought it up at the last planning board meeting. I kind of gave them a heads up that we'll be looking for something strong.
And I just got my copy.
Master plan.
So, they're baking that into the process right
Mhm.
now as part of, both the open space and recreation plan and the housing production plans will be updated as part of the planning process.
Right, and so I think my point in here was just making sure that the housing trust is a part of that, a solid part of that
Yeah.
process, because it's, that component of it is kind of our document.
Right.
And I guess I don't see that if you didn't have 5 selectmen on the trust, why you couldn't still why the selectmen couldn't hire a housing administrator. So
Right.
I don't think that I think it's important, in fact, more important not to have all 5 of the
I was, honestly,
the
yeah.
trust, if for no other reason than for optics, because it creates sort of the problem that we have here, the me, myself, and I type of thing. Why do we bother having the trust then?
Mhm.
Anything, so.
Right, it was an awkward meeting last.
It was an awkward meeting tonight, it was an awkward meeting the last time too,
Right.
because we're talking to ourselves.
Right, now, I don't, honestly, I do not know the history of why it was 5 selectmen and 2 non-selectmen.
It doesn't have to be, and other towns don't have.
Yeah.
Other towns don't have it
It's
that
so,
way.
and I too
But
was
they
just
have-
trying to address the.
If they don't have it, they may have a housing authority, to counter, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think.
Well, it could also, again, be readdressed. If we were to then reinstate a new housing authority, then we revisit the composition of the trust.
Mhm.
I mean,
Right,
not
right.
raving
I
and
really
raving.
was trying to deal with the optics of it, but I was also trying to ensure that we had, more people on the trust and active involvement in affordable housing. Not that we aren't, but we're the Board of Selectmen, and so I was trying to get a higher mix of
Yeah,
not in
agree
that
with
energy
your-
towards
I
the
agree
affordable.
With your thinking on it. I just raised the issue because I don't know the answer to it.
Mhm.
If there is an answer
Yeah.
officially, but,
Yeah, I'm not sure it's critical that the Board of Selectmen have a majority on it.
I agree. because the Board of Selectmen still have
You just want
their
less
authority.
workload, Nathan.
No, it's just that the selectmen still have their authority. Because,
Yes,
there might be a
right.
time where the trust has to come to the selectmen for something.
Sure.
And so if we're coming to, we just don't want to be coming to ourselves for things that's stupid.
Okay, and what
Okay,
about
so-
going to 9? I mean, obviously, this working group could tweak this, but what about the concept of
Yeah, I mean, it
increasing
could
the
be
size?
7 with three Board of Selectmen instead of 4.
And the reason why I was thinking 9 was we're losing town volunteers who are interested in affordable housing. And so I was trying to beef this up a little bit to reduce the loss of resources to think about. And if that doesn't, that was just telling you why I thought of it.
Three. Okay.
Makes sense.
All right, so then it gets back to this working
Okay,
group
the
so that we
working
can
group.
move
Right.
forward.
Yes, that's fine.
I would recommend it's a Board of Selectmen member, a Housing Trust member, and at least one citizen at large. But I think 3 people is probably a good number.
Yeah.
And I think this would be an open meeting.
It is, if it's our working group,
Yeah.
it is definitely an open
It's-
meeting situation.
This is an official, must be sworn into type of group, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear that.
As opposed to the last
these are-
working group we just set up,
these are-
which is a staff, the staff.
Right.
working group.
Just want to be clear, these will be public meetings.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to remind you that the ground leases cannot be transferred until you have a housing authority.
We understand that was part of this.
So if you did something where you appointed the 3 people that you can appoint sooner rather than later, and they would transfer the ground lease, you could get moving a lot faster.
Yes, and that's, you don't have the benefit of having this here. I was not reading it word for word. It does say in here in step 2 that they need to transfer the leases. It's
So you
after
have
we
to
appoint them.
Have them first.
Yes.
So would you
Before the-
reconsider being appointed to the housing authority if we were to do, would you put your name in the?
I think I brought George to do that. You know, my feeling on it,
Yeah.
that I prefer to be on the trust.
Okay. Just say, because this is a little different conversation, it's a little different authority than what you might have envisioned, so
This
that's.
would be
my-
an interim
It's just
position
totally,
that would go
that you
away,
would vote yourself out of.
and then you would morph
Possibly, because
Possibly over to the
because you
housing.
would be one member of a board that may or may not decide
If this
that
is just
they're-
what we're going to be,
You know, we cannot.
in the end, after we
dissolve
appoint
the
them, they
housing
can do whatever
authority.
they want.
Yeah, all we can do is kind of set it in motion.
That's fine, I'll do whatever.
Okay.
Okay, all
So,
right.
so this group would get the appointment recommendations.
Yes.
I've been getting some. I think everybody here is, they would all go to this group. This group would talk through them, talk to them, and then present to the Board of Selectmen, hopefully soon, who we would be appointing to
So,
the Housing Authority.
You would be the trust member. Who would want to be the other? I shouldn't be
I
it
mean,
because I'm the chair of the trust, so.
I proposed it.
Yeah, why don't you do
So,
it? 'cause
it's gotta be you,
You know
okay.
what you wrote.
It's gotta be
It has
you.
to be me, but.
It has to be you.
And then, we need one.
So this is, you were asking me to do the temporary thing,
No, I'm asking you if you would like to, well, my question to you was, would you like this new working group to consider you?
yes, the working group,
As-
but not the housing authority.
Oh, so she would actually, so I guess
She'd
she's
be interested in
volunteering to
being
be
on the
on
working
And then go from there.
Okay, so would you mind just sending a letter, an email to Tim expressing your interest?
Sure.
We just need to have that for paperwork.
I'd be glad to. But I brought George here for the housing
The Housing
authority.
Well, I mean, for me, housing authority, housing trust committees, whatever, I'm just interested in the whole concept. I have a lot of thoughts, but I like to hear other people before I speak up.
Mhm. Okay.
All right.
So if you would send an email.
Well, I
Oh,
did. I sent a letter.
I think I saw it. Yes. Yep. I think. Yep.
I don't think I did.
All right.
Okay.
We are receipt.
Okay. Anything else about this topic?
I think we,
So I propose that we create. Well, actually, we're going to have to appoint people in the next meeting, right? Or can we just go ahead and appoint even though we don't have a letter?
Give me a piece of paper.
Contingent upon receipt of the letter.
Well, we have verbal.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. We're all
You
witnesses.
can make the
verbal.
appointments.
Right. Okay. Somebody want to make a motion?
So I move that we create a working group. Let's see where it is. To develop a proposal that's outlined in this memo, and to work to find people who can, that the selectmen can appoint to the housing authority in either late this fall or early winter. And I propose that this working group be composed of Carrie Kissinger as the trust member, Nathan Brown as the Board of Selectmen member, and Maureen Deary Cosgrove.
Just do.
Cosgrove Deary, I don't remember how,
Fine.
sorry,
Just
I
go with
screwed
the
it up, as the member at large.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you.
You're welcome. This went very well.
No, it's gonna be a public meeting, right, so that.
There will be public
Yes.
meetings with minutes.
Yeah.
Yep. Everybody is welcome.
So George is going to give it in your meetings, okay.
I'm going to hand it over to you from here on.
This is what I guess
It's
cemetery deeds.
it's your meeting.
You have a copy of it? I think we've got some cemetery deeds in your packet.
Yep.
I'll move them real fast, how's that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Originally, there was 3 in the electronic packet, but another one came in today, so.
Okay.
Do I have to stay here for you to approve
What?
Okay.
extending the exhibition or not?
I was gonna bring that up when.
The administrator's
yes.
report.
Yes.
You don't
Let's
have to
just-
be here.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Want to take it out of order?
Yeah,
Just take it out of order, that way you'll know we
Yeah,
did
so I
it.
can support the- I'm so
Could you
sorry.
just repeat your request briefly and the board can keep the display up until Sunday?
Can you keep the display up until, can I keep the display up till Sunday and then move the display for 2 weeks to the
Cemetery.
the green cemetery to be planted, so the poppies will be planted on the graves of those that fought in World War I.
So is there a, can I have a motion to allow the poppy exhibit display
display.
to remain in the town center
Sunday the 18th.
until Sunday, November 18th, and then to be moved to Green Cemetery to the graves of people who fought in World War I for a period of 2 weeks after.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
No, thank you. It was a
Thank you.
beautiful
Let me
display.
thank you for
Absolutely amazing.
all of it.
Yeah, and it was a great community
Yeah.
event and effort. It was great.
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been fantastic for me, not just, I mean, amazing. I'm fantastic.
All right.
You know what I mean.
We know you.
All right, I move the Board of Selectmen vote to transfer land in the public burial ground to Alan and Deborah Dewey, 36 South Street at Green Cemetery, Lot D 201, graves 1, 2, and 3.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
I move the Board of Selectmen vote to transfer land in the public burial ground to Robert and Phyllis Clark, 174 Robbins Drive at Green Cemetery, Lot D 109, graves 1 and 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
I move the Board of Selectmen vote to transfer land in the public burial ground to William and Beverly Barton, 131 Woodridge Road at Green Cemetery, Lot D 115, graves 1 and 2.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to transfer land in the public burial ground to Stephen and Elizabeth Luttrell, 105 Woodridge Road at Green Cemetery, Lot D 109, graves 1 and 2.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous? Okay, can I just ask a quick question of everybody? Just in the, in trying to reduce paper usage. If we have this written like this as motions, do we feel we need to
No.
get copies of the actual certificates?
That's a very good question, and I would say
I
we
don't feel
need them.
you need to copy them. Yes, thank you for providing them, but this is the important stuff.
Save even more paper in my pack because there aren't any.
Okay,
Okay.
it's your meeting, Tim.
Okay, we're not going to act on an appointment to the Board of Health tonight. At one point, we thought the Board of Health was going to interview a candidate tonight, and they might be able to come to the meeting to present that candidate for a joint appointment, but we'll have to do that next time.
They saw how late we were going and decided.
But they do have a candidate.
They always were a smart
that
group.
they're interested in, to replace Ellen on the Board of Health. So we can move the town administrator's report. One other item that's not in it this week is that at long last, the state has approved the transfer of the package store license at Fern's Country Store.
Thank goodness, I
To the
was
new
wondering.
owners. So Jen
Yeah.
has the license for you to sign before you leave tonight. So we'll do the license transfer, and they'll hold that until you do your renewals in December, but
Yeah,
you know,
well,
they'll be
but-
able to sell during the holiday season
Yeah.
now. Alcohol. Then moving on, there are two letters in your packet from the Municipal Facilities Committee, and Kate might be able to speak to.
Yeah, since I wrote both of them.
So, well, they want to know a couple of things. They want to know if how the selectmen feel about a single fueling facility in town versus the two that we've currently had, having redundant fueling facilities. As you know, the one at the fire station is going to be coming out of commission in January of next year. And everyone's going to be fueling up at DPW for the foreseeable future.
They've been doing that now.
Yes, because they run out of fuel. And then also, if the board would instruct departments that are currently storing records or equipment at DPW, if they'd get their stuff out of there, so that the DPW could actually have use of their own facilities. And some of that is already happening, as you know, the COA is moving the
They've already
medical
moved.
equipment to Highland and
Yeah.
and they're finding homes. So I don't know, Kate, if you wanted to add to that, but that's what the Facilities Committee wanted to ask the board. For those two.
I'm happy to answer any questions. I think the most important of the two memos
Tank.
is the one about the fuel, the secondary fueling
Right.
station. Currently, we have one at the DPW, which is above ground, and it's to code. And everybody's been using it. And we've had two, and possibly because it was a backup, possibly because we've just always have, possibly because it's maybe a little more convenient for the fire department to have this, you know, there, but now that it's no longer there, you know, is it worth $100,000 to have a backup fueling station?
A quarter of a mile.
A quarter of a mile away.
No, it's not.
And we did look at other alternatives. One would be a fuel service that comes to the police department, or rather the fire department, if they, you know, really didn't want to go to the DPW. But as far as we understand, there's no real problems with people going to the DPW because they're big enough and have enough maneuvering room for the big trucks to get in there.
Plenty of room over there.
So if I reword what I think I'm seeing in this letter, the Municipal Facilities Committee is asking us to, because we have to do something with the tank at the fire department, right?
It
So
has
we
to
would-
come out,
it
no
would-
matter what.
We remove the tank at the fire department and then figure out what we want to do. We have another tank, let's see how well that goes. If in the future we feel that we need to do something different, we could, but let's not jump into it right now.
Yes, and there's a lot of reasons for not jumping into it on that site, because we're gonna have a new fire chief. Maybe he wants it above ground, maybe he wants it below ground because he doesn't want it above ground. We don't wanna make that decision at this point, for this
Mhm.
newly hired person.
And so-
And we also do think that maybe there are other better ways to spend that
$200,000.
And, you know, the Chief Fisher was very interested in having it below ground, which is much more expensive than above ground, and, anyway.
Right, but
that-
we
that
wouldn't,
front.
we wouldn't, you know, that money was already appropriated, right, as,
No.
No.
okay.
To close the,
Well, the money.
Money to close
To
these-
take out
To
the
take
old
out the old
tanks
tank.
yeah.
has been appropriated
Okay.
and spent, plus some. But,
So the tanks are gone now?
no, but we're
There-
working
will
on
be.
it.
So what you're saying is we wouldn't
But-
spend that part of the money that was to put new tanks in?
There was no money allocated for putting new tanks in.
Does it,
We would have to allocate new money for that.
we got a
request to the
grant,
state
we got a
legislature.
grant approved
Oh, was it
at the
approved?
state level.
Yeah.
It's been
Well, it
approved,
hasn't
but
been
it,
funded, though.
but it hasn't been funded.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Right.
So, and who-
$200,000
who are we
for
making
new.
mad at us?
Probably the police department and the fire department. I don't know. The thing is this is this a really a must-have, or is it kind of, is it would like to have it? Would like to have.
And I
So-
probably wouldn't suggest it, but of course they could drive an extra mile and a half to the diesel fuel station, right on the town line.
Yeah, so I think,
Probably for
I
less
think it
money.
makes complete sense if the only thing that is budgeted already is the removal of the tanks. I thought it was the removal, and I thought it was to do everything, but if the only thing that is budgeted is the removal of the tanks, then that's what we do now, and we figure out what to do in the future.
Right.
I think at the very least, we need to have some time.
You-
I'd rather
right.
not rush into
Yeah.
putting new tanks in, because we don't know, do we want to put, you know, a trailer in that spot, you know?
And it solves what has to happen by January 1st.
Yes.
Well,
Well,
the removal has to happen by January 1st,
But if
which
there's
we
no-
have
But if there's no
budgeted.
new tank to put in there, I mean, the question is what happens after January 1st?
They go to the,
When they
yeah.
run out of gas. Okay, the answer is they can go to the DPW and get more.
Yeah, they're already doing that now, because they're out of fuel over here. Yeah.
So what action are we taking?
You would want to make a policy or either it's I'm not sure if it's a policy or just a kind of a
Provide direction?
to the
Yeah.
municipal facilities, because they didn't want to make that decision and make you mad at them.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Them.
I think it makes sense for the.
If everybody's going to be bad at the selectmen.
I think that it makes sense for the
Get
facilities
one.
to move forward with the project as it was currently defined, which was to get rid of the current tanks. And
Yeah.
we'll figure out the rest later, with their recommendation.
Okay.
And if the state comes up with 200,000,
Then-
then we
And-
can do whatever we want.
I don't think that's something we have to vote on.
Hopefully the memo outlined
but-
that some thought has been given to
Exactly.
this.
Yes, yep.
I don't
We
thi-
concur.
I don't think we need to vote on it, but does everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the other one was, probably does need a directive to all the town boards and offices or whatever, to please inventory and remove whatever is being stored. Or I don't know how to,
We can set something out on
at the
that, a memo.
DPW. And that in future, you know, we would require that they need to provide their own
Budget at the-
storage.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to ask Tim to, or do we even need to do that? Tim, can you just do that?
I can just do that, if that's the board's,
Yeah.
consensus. Yeah, all right.
We just wanted to incentivize, not, you know.
Yep.
Okay,
Uh,
great.
I'll move on to number 2. We have a letter in the packet from Governor Baker announcing an additional $50,000 in Chapter 98 for this fiscal year, bringing the total to just over $300,000 for the year. Obviously, that wasn't programmed into Gary's plans for the year. The Finance Committee is suggesting potentially using that as the design funds for the complete streets funding, should we be awarded a grant. As you know, that's for construction only, and there's still a missing piece of design, about $45,000 or $50,000 worth of design that needed to be funded. They would rather use funds of this nature than to ask Gary to find it in the highway department budget or somewhere else. Because of course, you know.
Cleaning up Brook Street.
Nice little windfall to.
Yeah,
to
no, it's
come
convenient.
When we
convenient
needed it.
amount.
Yeah.
And also attached to a report, there's a proposed revised mission statement from the Energy Task Force. They'd like to come in and discuss with the board at a future meeting, so I included it for your information tonight. And additionally, the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee.
Before we leave that.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Just one comment. I think the mission statement they propose basically is twofold. It's lower energy use and expand the use of renewable energy. There's one sort of thing I think it might be worth considering for the first item on this mission statement would be to establish a baseline measurement of the town's current level of greenhouse gas emissions against which progress can be measured and reported on an ongoing basis on the town website.
Yes,
I mean,
good point.
without being able to measure it, you know, it's just.
And they are already doing that to some degree. They haven't, not, it doesn't include residences, I think, but certainly all the vehicular stuff and all the municipal facilities are included.
Yeah, so it would be good to have that on. I
And
totally agree with you.
and that baseline goes back to like 1990 or so.
Good.
Yeah, and so I think, you know,
Point that out.
publish it so that we can all see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I just want to add one other thing. I think the Energy Task Force is going to need some help, some administrative help, let's say. They had the grant writer at one point. They have some big projects. They've gotten lots of grants. Now they need to manage them. I think we need to, when we're doing this, also need to think about how we can help them, because I understand, you know, I realize it's a budget line, but savings don't get reflected in budgets, and sometimes you need to spend money to save money.
Yeah, and they have saved us a ton of money.
Yeah.
And so I would be in favor of doing that, and you know, and I brought this up several years in a row, particularly back when, you know, there was the request to fund, you know, the energy, the grant writing.
What- yeah.
I forget what the title was.
I don't know what your title is.
But I think that you know, before I would support something like that, I think we need to figure out how are we really measuring the savings. Because what happens to date is there's savings, but that just means that the departments have more money to spend. And we have to stop that.
Yeah. Well,
And so, because we can fund this person with those savings. And if that's the case, then I'm totally in favor of it.
Yes, okay.
But if
I
we're
agree
we're
with you.
hiring somebody and that's just adding.
No,
and-
I'm thinking
Yeah.
exactly that it is.
And
If we save
it's-
money, something has to come out of the budget.
Right,
And
right.
they are also gathering those data, and we'll have them available for us, including, because they know how much they've saved over the last several years.
But and I know they do, but the problem is as a town, we actually haven't saved that money. The budgets haven't come down. We have to figure out how we
How
do
we-
that.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct, right, yep,
The real savings.
yes, yes.
The transfer of money from one pocket to the other so we can pay for this. And not the taxpayer's pocket.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just
As-
going to
as-
say
as
one
we-
other thing,
Go ahead.
is that, you know, we are looking for like a part-time facilities manager, and I'm wondering and we're having trouble finding a part-time, and I'm wondering if that sort of thing could be added to the facilities manager's job description, so that we, you know, are not hiring a whole bunch of
Closer to full-time.
Yeah, closer to full-time, help us with that, and also not having a bunch of different people doing the same job.
I think that's a good idea. I don't know how we get there, though. I think it starts with how can we actually realize the savings.
Yeah.
Well, that's an accounting issue.
Okay, so we'll
Money we're not spending on.
We'll talk to them more about this, right? So
Yes, we're gonna have
they're
them
gonna be
in
on
to
a
talk about
future.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Also, item number 4, the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee is requesting of the board that you approve a stop sign at Martin Street, at Curve Street. Some of the residents.
Is that one with the little island in the middle?
It's just a really wide kind of opening. There's not a raised island or
No.
anything, but I tried to take some pictures. They came out pretty dark
Was
and
that
awful.
those pictures that?
Yeah.
What-
If you,
I was wondering what that
if you
was.
wanted to hold off on it and take a ride by it, and we could do it
Tim's car
next
back
time.
there.
Yeah, that's right. That's the only way you know.
Okay.
But you can't really tell.
Martin is the one that's on the left, well, it's
Just past the bog if you were heading toward,
225.
no, the other way, yeah. You drove past the bog house and then
Really,
the
one-
bog.
So they want the stop sign on Martin?
On Martin Street.
There's no stop sign there.
That's correct.
Is it a T intersection?
Yes.
And there's no stop sign.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's, well, there should, by state law.
There's nothing at all, yeah.
The Martin Street already has one, because when you come to a T, the
Should
guy
be-
that
it
dead
should
ends into the
be there, yeah.
thing has to stop. But if they want to put the belt on with the suspenders, I have no problem with it.
Is there a motion to approve the installation of a stop sign on Martin Street at its intersection with Curve Street?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. The heck. I mean, it's de facto anyway.
Yeah, you should stop there anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know, but you know,
Okay.
but if they feel that,
Any further
that
discussion?
people are not.
I think because it's so wide, people tend to roll right through it. Yeah.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carrie?
Abstain, I don't know enough about it to, I really don't.
Oh, do you want to just wait then?
No, I
You
think
could all take a look at it if you wanted to. or-
defer to your judgment, I just don't, I don't even know where it is, I mean, let alone.
Yeah, it's just that if it's a T intersection, they're supposed to.
Where does the other
stop
end of Martin
people who are
go?
not Stopping, and the TSAC thinks it's dangerous.
I think it doesn't go
We're
anywhere.
requesting
Is it a dead end?
remind people
Or
that
would it go into Chelmsford?
that's what I'm saying.
I'm not sure. If it continues into Chelmsford or not.
All right, so I guess we've already taken the vote, right?
It's okay. Doesn't have to, not
doesn't
everything
have
has
to.
to be unanimous.
Well, I was just gonna say, maybe we could just go drive it, but I'm comfortable with it
I mean-
being, I know where the street is, and it is a T intersection.
Yeah, it's a
It's
de
a
facto
very
stop.
wide intersection.
Yeah.
So it's just putting it,
Yeah,
it's just making it obvious you should stop.
right.
Yeah.
May not, stop people, but at least
Yeah.
there'll be a stop sign there. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. Very good. Then item number 5, the proposed date and time of the Christmas tree lighting is Tuesday, December 4th at 6 p.m. on the Common. And the new owner of Ferns, Matt Herwick, is involved in that. Abby Zimmerman is organizing volunteers. It's for the first time in a lot of years, Larry and Robin are not involved in being the prime organizers, so everyone's kind of putting it together, how much had to go into making this thing happen, so. And, of course, Gary Davis and DPW will be involved in stringing the lights, and it happens to be a Tuesday that the board is not meeting, so it's usually,
Well
inevitably,
planned.
it's a, yeah. It's a week that the board is meeting. And I think that's all I've got in my report tonight.
Okay, would you just chat with Gary about his thoughts about Brook Street?
Oh, right, from earlier,
You
yeah.
know, I drive that every single day. It's not that much of
She lives at the other,
a, I know, it's a narrow street.
it is, it's a very narrow.
Yeah, just
Along with.
I'll ask them.
streets in
Yeah.
Carlisle.
like, you
Or
know,
it sounded like
does he need some
they had
funds to-
planned to kind of do a finish coat and didn't. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
just-
the case, but yeah.
Just his
Actually,
son.
the street's in good shape, actually.
We're not saying do something, just want to
Yeah,
hear from
I'll
him.
ask them
Yeah.
about that.
Move a couple trees. And they're right, there is brush all over the place.
Yeah.
And are we doing anything with the resignation?
Is that,
Jim Marchant?
Oh. Well, I guess the board should accept that. The assessors, I think, have identified a candidate that they'd like to bring forward at their next meeting. Of course, the assessors will be in on the 27th because we have the tax hearing. So they're hoping to have a candidate by the next time you meet. Of course, Jim's been on the board for many years, he's chairman for many years, so he's going to be a big loss.
Oh, huge.
Big loss there. You know, that was his business too, you know, appraisals and.
20 years on the Board of Assessors.
Yeah. Yeah, long time.
Enjoy them. God. Okay.
Is it in fact true that he has to resign his position?
Oh, it's not because he's moving?
Yeah.
To another town? No, it's not.
Well, that's because
You don't have to, yeah, you don't have to live in town to be on a committee. To be an elected.
It says that he will have to resign his because he's no longer living. I'm just saying.
Oh, wait a minute.
It's actually
I'm
not
trying
true.
to remember, are they elected? Because
Board of Assessors.
Yes, he's elected.
if they're elected, that
Oh.
is true.
Yeah, okay.
Appointed is not true, but, yeah.
Well, I think it also depends upon the committee. Some say that they have to be a resident, some don't.
There's not a bylaw that says you need to be a resident, so.
Unless the
committee-
committee
of an
says that
appointed
you,
committee.
unless some
Unless they've
committees
got-
do say, and that's
yeah.
why committees we've created since then, I've always tried to make sure it says that they don't.
But
have
as
to
an
be a
elected, yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, in fact, he was just reelected this year.
anyone want to make a motion?
And send
Probably
them a
wants
letter?
to.
Oh,
Yeah.
I move that we accept with extreme gratitude the resignation of Jim Marchant from the.
With extreme gratitude for the work
For
you
the-
served,
yeah, for
not
the-
for resigning.
Yeah, right. For the 20 years of his excellent service to the Board of Assessors.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
All right, what do we got here? Liaison reports, is it? Next, anybody's got anything?
I don't have any.
I have none.
Well, I got a bunch of them.
Hit the highlights.
I will be very, one thing is though, I just talked to the librarian. She had a new budget item on, that she presented to the FinCom, and I discussed that with her. And so that will be something that will, I gave her some I didn't give her direction. I gave her some suggestions. And I think she will be coming to us, to see.
First.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and then I just want to report that we had a very productive meeting with the school committee, long-term caps, and facilities, municipal facilities. Talked about possibly sharing position. I think that's totally out the window at this point, unless we totally change the whole structure of everything the way we do, so I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So, and then I gave you those two letters that also, so that I will report back the other direction.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just on the Master Planning Steering Committee, they have solicited people to volunteer for the Master Planning Advisory Committee, which all along has been thought to be maybe 20, 25, maybe 30 people. Well, it's going to be 40 plus.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
The thinking being that they really don't want to eliminate anybody that's shown an interest in being on the advisory committee. So it will be a large, difficult to manage well group, but the group won't start meeting except for a preliminary orientation meeting this year, late this year, but they'll start meeting after the consultant's on board, potentially next May or June or something like that, and then maybe only meet every 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and be a sounding board so that if recommendations or ideas are presented, they can say, you know, we think this is good or bad or indifferent, and they can also then in turn communicate to the people that they deal with about why the planning is moving in the direction it's moving.
Mhm.
So it's both input back to the steering committee and the consultants and direction for them, and proliferation of ideas back to the town.
Okay, thank you. I have one follow-up thing. I was wondering if they're willing to, or if, Tim, if you could work out a way that we could have a sit down with the personnel board just to kind of work through that goal that we have.
Okay.
Just to make sure that we're each understanding our individual role, our board's roles.
Okay.
And the other thing, I think we need to encourage them to really work intensively during this period up till December, or up until we, because last year there were these big gaps.
Yeah.
Once the budget is closed, then they can, kind of take it more easy, but we really do need them to.
I think FinCom told them to finish their business by the end of December if it had an impact on the budget next year. And they've been able to actually, they're having much better luck with 4 members. They've got a little flexibility now, so they've been able to book 3 meetings between now and the end of December.
We need to remember that they, I think what we need to work out with them is they don't approve the position, they just approve the appropriateness of the job description.
Right.
Yeah, but if they don't even do that, we can't get in, we can't get off first base.
Yes, except we probably want to approve or not approve the job description before they even consider the role before they even consider the job description. It does, because it's just a waste of their time if we're not going to fund it.
You're right.
And so that's what I'd like to work through with them as soon as we possibly can. Just make sure that we're all in agreement on that process.
All right.
And I also just want to report that that Tim's contract is finalized, as we had discussed. Kate took a read through it just to make sure that I'd gotten everything from our meeting. I haven't signed it yet because we finalized it when I was in California, but if you have a printout, I can sign it.
I think we do.
Signed, anxious.
Two originals, yeah.
No, I just had that one question. I didn't know.
Okay.
Good.
I think, no. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I think it wasn't part of the initial run-through.
Yeah, okay. Well, it might be in the town bylaw. This whole thing is subject to the town bylaw, so.
Uh-huh.
But.
Yeah. I think it's gone long enough.
No, I wasn't.
Okay, any other liaisons?
No, we're at the approval of
Move to
minutes.
approval minutes.
I actually have a bunch of typos, but, that kind of thing. But I do have one substantive change on the second page under the update of the fuel tank project. In the second paragraph where it talks, the last sentence says the underground fuel tanks are no longer allowed in the current location. That's not correct. So I would like to change that to the underground fuel tanks must be replaced by December 31st because of new state standards. Maybe, in fact, instead of replaced, let's say must be removed, because they don't have to be replaced. And then down in the next 2 paragraphs down, Kate Reed stated that starts that. The last sentence should read, some items.
Oh.
Somebody jump, there we go.
There you go.
Have been taken off the current list of fire department projects for this fiscal year, so that there may be additional funds available to cover the cost for the closure of the underground tanks. As it said, the DPW has been, anyway, it was.
Yeah, and so I think that's, yeah, I just want to, not at all talking about your edit here, but I just want to be careful, like with all of these projects as we move forward, that if we're, obviously there's a little bit of fungibility in the budget, and that's why we wrote it that way. But if there's something we know we have to do this year, we decide not to do it this year, but we know we have to do it next year, I don't think it's right to spend the money this year on something different, because then we're going to the town.
We're not, this is still fire department funds.
Yeah. Yeah, so,
it's
so
just
as
that-
long as those projects that we're not gonna do aren't just, we're not just saying, oh, we're gonna do that next year, even though we presented it as a project for this year.
Well, actually, those projects have 3 years to be done in.
Uh-huh.
That warrant says it's good for 3 years.
Okay, so it's out of the same
it doesn't say
bucket.
necessarily that
It's
it's
out of the
going to be,
same
it's
bucket.
out of the same bucket.
Okay.
It's what I was saying was, what I was trying to say here was that this is not a cost overrun yet or a budget overrun yet, because we haven't done all the projects and there might be savings in another
Mhm.
project. We haven't.
But in 3
there's
years,
not a-
you'll still be in the budget.
That we're certainly going to be trying
Right.
to still be in the
Okay.
budget in 3 years.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems, is we all think of this year's projects and next year's projects. All of them are really, last year we asked for money for the next 3 years for this list of projects. This year we'll ask for money for the next 3 years for a
Right.
whole new list of projects.
Right.
Because you can't do them in a year.
Right. I just want to make sure that we're not going to the town asking for funds for the same project over and over and
No,
over
we
again, and
absolutely are not.
but doing other things.
Yeah, no, we're
Yeah.
not.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So move.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. We'd just like to I realize the goal is always to be here at the meetings. On the 23rd, it was just painful to be remote.
Oh, I know.
I just couldn't hear, and it was one of those ones where there were people, standing up, and I could hear like every third word. So maybe there's something we can try to do to.
Yeah, improve
I
the-
certainly will try not to go on vacation anymore, but.
Besides, the place you go probably isn't there anymore if you're going to California.
He wasn't there on
so,
vacation.
yeah, you have to do something. I don't know, because I don't know what your experience is when you're in Florida, but.
Well, actually, the Skype is pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we kind of always try to use that.
Yeah.
The phone.
Yes.
The phone was painful.
Yeah.
I know. I've been
Well, it wasn't
there.
even a regular speakerphone. It was just
Yeah.
a regular desktop phone.
Yeah.
Well, the time I tried it wasn't even that. I think it was Tim's iPhone. And that, you
Yeah.
talk about, you think you had it
We
bad.
gotta come up with a better solution.
I gave up.
Yeah.
I hung up. I
Okay.
couldn't get anybody's attention.
So is there a motion to go into executive session?
I move that the board enter into executive session pursuant with MGL Chapter 30A, Paragraph 21A, Paragraph 3, to discuss strategy with respect to non-union bargaining with J.J. Supple, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the town's ability to bargain, and that afterwards the board will not return to open session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, Brown eye.
Kissinger, aye.
Reed, aye?
Lewis, aye.
Okay, so that ends our public portion of tonight's agenda. Thank you very much.